That's Always Late reveals the universal human experience of staircase, wit, or l'esprit de l'escalier, where you think of the perfect response after the argument ends, because your brain is too busy managing emotions during conflict to be witty on the spot, manifesting in interviews, fights, and late-night overthinking sessions. But few people realize that behind this seemingly innocent cognitive quirk lies one of the most sinister discoveries in social manipulation history, uncovered through a series of mysterious events that began in a neuroscience laboratory in 1997, and has since revealed how the delayed nature of human wit serves as the perfect weapon for maintaining social hierarchies, crushing confidence, and ensuring that those who would challenge authority are systematically rendered speechless in the moments when their words could change everything. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a brilliant cognitive neuroscientist and social psychologist at Yale University, was found dead in her laboratory on a humid August evening in 1997, apparently from a severe allergic reaction that had caused fatal anaphylactic shock, despite her having no known allergies. The 36-year-old researcher, internationally respected for her groundbreaking work on cognitive performance under social stress and the neuroscience of delayed verbal processing, had been investigating the mechanisms behind staircase wit when she uncovered something that would ultimately cost her her life. Her laboratory showed signs of intense research activity, with brain imaging data scattered across multiple monitors, while her computer displayed evidence of frantic attempts to document crucial findings about social dominance and cognitive suppression before her death. A note found hidden inside her copy of Denis Diderot's writings on l'esprit de l'escalier, written in increasingly urgent handwriting, read, "They don't want people to understand that staircase wit is being systematically exploited to maintain social control. It's not just a cognitive limitation, it's the fundamental mechanism that keeps people silent when they need to speak truth to power. If people understood how emotional arousal suppresses verbal creativity, they could develop techniques to overcome this disadvantage and challenge authority effectively." Elena had been working on what she called Project Verbal Liberation, a comprehensive investigation into how the neurological basis of staircase wit was being systematically exploited by those in power to ensure that challenges to authority occurred only in private retrospection rather than public confrontation, maintaining social hierarchies through the strategic manipulation of cognitive performance under stress. Her research assistant, a young psychologist named Amy Cuddy, who would later become famous for her work on power poses and embodied cognition, knew that Elena had discovered something that threatened powerful systems built on maintaining the cognitive disadvantage of those who would challenge authority, while ensuring that brilliant responses emerged only in safe solitude rather than dangerous public discourse. The mystery began 8 years earlier, when Elena noticed something profoundly disturbing while analyzing brain imaging data from subjects experiencing social confrontation and verbal challenges. She had been documenting the neurological basis of delayed verbal creativity when she discovered that the cognitive mechanisms underlying staircase wit were not random limitations, but predictable patterns that could be deliberately triggered and exploited to silence opposition at crucial moments. Elena's initial observations were revolutionary. When she studied brain activity during social conflicts and verbal challenges using advanced neuroimaging techniques, she found that emotional arousal consistently suppressed activity in the brain regions responsible for creative language processing and witty response generation, while enhancing areas associated with threat detection and survival response, creating a neurological guarantee that people would be verbally disadvantaged precisely when articulate resistance was most needed. Using sophisticated brain imaging, combined with social psychology experiments and linguistic analysis, Elena had been documenting how staircase wit operated as both a natural cognitive limitation and a systematically exploited tool for maintaining power imbalances through the strategic creation of social stress that predictably suppressed verbal creativity and intellectual performance in challenging situations. The neurological evidence revealed that during social confrontation, the brain's executive function centers became overwhelmed by stress hormones, while creative language areas shut down, making sophisticated verbal responses nearly impossible, while ensuring that brilliant comebacks would emerge only hours later when they could no longer influence the social dynamic or challenge the established power structure. Modern neuroscience research has since validated Elena's discoveries using advanced brain imaging and hormonal analysis. Research conducted at institutions, including Harvard Medical School, Stanford, and the University of California, has consistently confirmed that social stress predictably impairs creative thinking and verbal fluency while enhancing defensive responses that prioritize survival over articulate resistance or intellectual challenge. Dr. Cian Bylok's research on choking under pressure provided the foundation for understanding how performance anxiety specifically impaired the cognitive processes necessary for witty responses, while later research has demonstrated how this neurological vulnerability is systematically exploited in power dynamics to ensure that challenges to authority remain ineffective and easily dismissed. Elena's research revealed that staircase wit was not merely an amusing psychological phenomenon, but a practical tool for identifying and exploiting systematic vulnerabilities in human cognitive performance that made effective resistance to authority nearly impossible during the moments when such resistance could actually influence outcomes and social structures. The institutional conspiracy that Elena uncovered was more sophisticated than traditional forms of control because it operated through natural neurological limitations rather than obvious coercion or censorship. Her hidden files revealed that various political, corporate, educational, and social institutions had developed systematic approaches for exploiting staircase wit vulnerability while creating high-stress confrontational environments that predictably suppressed verbal creativity and intellectual challenge. Political systems regularly created debate formats and confrontational scenarios designed to maximize emotional arousal while minimizing the cognitive resources necessary for effective challenge, ensuring that opposition voices would be rendered inarticulate precisely when their words could influence public opinion or policy decisions. Corporate environments used identical strategies to suppress employee challenges during meetings and performance reviews while maintaining the appearance of open dialogue and democratic decision-making. Elena had discovered what she termed systematic cognitive suppression, a phenomenon where institutions deliberately created social stress conditions that exploited staircase wit vulnerability to ensure that challenges to authority occurred only in private retrospection rather than public confrontation, where they could actually threaten existing power arrangements. But the implications extended far beyond institutional manipulation. When people understood the neurological basis of staircase wit, they could begin developing strategies for managing social stress and maintaining cognitive performance during confrontational situations, potentially overcoming the natural disadvantage that kept them silent when their voices were most needed. Elena's breakthrough came when she started analyzing not just the neurological mechanisms of staircase wit, but how understanding these mechanisms could inform techniques for maintaining verbal creativity and intellectual performance during social stress while protecting against systematic exploitation of cognitive vulnerability. The research revealed that staircase wit occurred because the brain's threat detection systems overrode creative thinking centers during social confrontation, but this process could be managed through specific training techniques that maintained access to linguistic creativity while managing emotional arousal and stress responses. The research also revealed that recognizing staircase wit exploitation provided powerful tools for identifying manipulative social environments while developing personal strategies for maintaining cognitive performance during challenging interactions that could determine career outcomes, relationship dynamics, and social influence. Elena had been preparing to publish her findings when she began receiving threatening communications from unknown sources warning her to abandon her research. A letter found in her files, with all identifying information carefully removed, read, "Dr. Vasquez, your research into cognitive performance threatens essential social stability mechanisms that depend on maintaining appropriate responses to authority and expertise. We strongly advise you to discontinue this line of inquiry for your own safety and the protection of communication systems that require participants to maintain respectful silence during challenging interactions." Her response, drafted but never sent, revealed her determination. "I will not allow systematic exploitation of cognitive vulnerability to continue silencing people when they need to speak truth to power. People deserve to understand how emotional arousal suppresses their verbal creativity while developing techniques to maintain intellectual performance during social confrontation." The cognitive liberation analysis will be published regardless of who benefits from keeping people speechless during crucial moments. Elena's death remains mysterious, but her research lived on through Cuddy and other colleagues who had witnessed the documentation showing how staircase wit revealed fundamental vulnerabilities in human cognitive performance while providing tools for understanding and potentially overcoming the neurological disadvantages that kept people silent during important social confrontations. The research expanded to examine various manifestations of cognitive suppression and discovered that this pattern was one of the most pervasive sources of social control in modern society, operating across multiple domains, while remaining largely invisible to those experiencing its silencing effects. Elena's hidden research revealed the psychological mechanisms that made staircase wit so predictable and exploitable, while so difficult for people to recognize and overcome. Modern humans, especially those educated to respect authority and maintain social harmony, were systematically unable to access their full verbal creativity during confrontational situations, while experiencing the frustration of delayed brilliance that could never influence the original interaction. The cultural programming around social courtesy and respectful dialogue had created additional barriers to understanding staircase wit as a source of systematic disadvantage, rather than simply an amusing quirk of human psychology. Most people had been taught to accept their verbal limitations during conflict, rather than recognizing these limitations as neurological vulnerabilities that could be managed and potentially overcome. Accurate cognitive performance education bypassed these barriers by providing information about the neurological basis of verbal creativity and stress response, while offering techniques for maintaining intellectual performance during challenging social interactions. When people learned to manage their stress responses while preserving access to creative thinking, they could begin speaking effectively during confrontational moments, rather than only in private retrospection. The research also revealed that modern people benefited enormously from understanding staircase wit mechanisms, because it provided frameworks for recognizing manipulative social environments, while developing personal strategies for maintaining cognitive performance during interactions that could significantly affect their lives and opportunities. Elena's training protocols taught people to recognize when social environments were designed to exploit cognitive vulnerability, while developing techniques for managing stress responses and maintaining verbal creativity during confrontational situations, including job interviews, performance reviews, political discussions, and personal conflicts. The protocol involved what Elena called cognitive performance management, the ability to recognize and manage the neurological responses that created staircase wit, while developing strategies for maintaining access to creative thinking and articulate expression during high-stress social interactions. The research extended beyond theoretical analysis to understanding how staircase wit vulnerability affected modern approaches to career advancement, political participation, and personal advocacy across various contexts where verbal performance during stress could determine outcomes and opportunities. The psychological impact of learning about cognitive performance management was profound. People felt empowered to challenge authority and express themselves effectively when they understood how to maintain verbal creativity during social stress, while developing techniques for overcoming the neurological disadvantages that had previously left them speechless during crucial moments. Elena's research revealed that many career failures, missed opportunities, and social defeats in modern contexts occurred because people had been systematically disadvantaged by institutions that exploited staircase wit vulnerability, while creating high-stress environments that predictably suppressed verbal creativity and intellectual challenge. The training involved teaching people to recognize the physical and emotional signs of cognitive suppression, while developing practical techniques for managing stress responses and maintaining access to creative thinking during challenging social interactions. Elena's protocols addressed the common concern that maintaining verbal creativity during confrontation would lead to inappropriate aggression or social conflict. Her research showed that understanding cognitive performance actually enhanced social effectiveness by enabling more articulate and thoughtful responses, rather than emotional reactivity or defensive silence. The timing of cognitive performance education proved crucial in Elena's research. People were most receptive to learning about staircase wit management when they were experiencing frustration with their verbal performance during important interactions, or when they were preparing for challenging social situations that could affect their careers or relationships. Elena's protocols addressed the complexity of maintaining cognitive performance while managing appropriate social boundaries and professional relationships. The research showed that effective verbal creativity required balancing assertive communication with social awareness, while avoiding both inappropriate aggression and disadvantageous silence. The research revealed that effective cognitive performance education required helping people understand the neurological basis of stress responses, while developing practical techniques for maintaining intellectual clarity and verbal creativity during challenging social interactions. Elena's work demonstrated that cognitive performance management was particularly important for people in positions where they regularly faced authority figures or challenging social dynamics, because their ability to maintain verbal creativity during stress could significantly affect their career advancement and personal effectiveness. The career applications of Elena's research were revolutionary. Job candidates who learned to manage staircase with vulnerability were significantly more successful in interviews, while employees who could maintain verbal creativity during confrontational meetings advanced more rapidly and influenced organizational decisions more effectively. The educational applications were equally significant. Students who understood cognitive performance management could participate more effectively in classroom discussions and defend their ideas during academic challenges, while maintaining access to their intellectual creativity during high-pressure academic situations. The therapeutic applications of Elena's research created opportunities for helping individuals who had been damaged by systematic silencing understand that their verbal limitations during confrontation resulted from neurological stress responses rather than intellectual inadequacy, while developing techniques for maintaining cognitive performance during challenging interactions. The political applications demonstrated how understanding cognitive performance could inform more effective approaches to public participation and democratic engagement, while protecting against systematic manipulation through stress-inducing communication environments designed to suppress opposition voices. The research revealed that staircase with vulnerability had widespread consequences across multiple domains because it affected fundamental social interactions, while making people vulnerable to systematic manipulation through environments designed to exploit cognitive limitations during crucial moments. Elena's research revealed that the staircase width pattern was particularly dangerous in contexts involving power imbalances, where cognitive suppression could prevent challenges to authority while maintaining the appearance of open dialogue and democratic participation. The research extended to understanding how staircase width vulnerability affected modern approaches to social justice and advocacy by demonstrating how systematic exploitation of cognitive performance limitations could silence marginalized voices during the moments when their articulate resistance could create meaningful change. Elena's protocols addressed the complexity of maintaining cognitive performance while navigating various social contexts that required different approaches to verbal creativity and intellectual expression. The goal was not eliminating all social courtesy, but developing sophisticated skills for maintaining intellectual performance when necessary. The research revealed that effective cognitive performance required helping people distinguish between appropriate social deference and systematic cognitive suppression, while developing techniques for maintaining verbal creativity when speaking truth to power was necessary for justice and positive change. Elena's work demonstrated that cognitive performance management was a learnable skill that improved with practice and awareness. People could develop ability to recognize cognitive suppression environments, manage stress responses during confrontation, and maintain verbal creativity when articulate resistance was necessary for their goals and values. The technological applications of cognitive performance research began emerging as virtual reality training systems allowed people to practice maintaining verbal creativity during simulated confrontational situations, while developing skills for managing stress responses in safe environments. The research extended to understanding how accurate information about cognitive performance affected modern approaches to leadership, development, and communication training by demonstrating that understanding neurological stress responses enabled more effective social interaction and professional advancement. Elena's research revealed that cognitive performance awareness was particularly important for young people who were developing approaches to social interaction and authority challenges that could either enhance or undermine their effectiveness throughout their lives based on the ability to maintain intellectual performance during stress. The measurement applications of cognitive performance research allowed individuals and organizations to evaluate communication environments while identifying patterns that enhanced or undermined verbal creativity and intellectual expression during challenging social interactions. The research revealed that accurate understanding of cognitive performance was particularly crucial during periods of social change when people needed to challenge authority
and express opposition effectively, while maintaining access to their intellectual creativity during high-stress confrontational situations. Elena's work demonstrated that cognitive performance truth was not just a neurological issue, but had practical implications for social justice, democratic participation, and individual empowerment, as staircase with vulnerability consistently prevented effective challenge to authority, while maintaining systems that benefited from keeping opposition voices silent during crucial moments. The legacy of Dr. Elena Vasquez's research continues to transform how people understand the relationship between stress, creativity, and social interaction. Every time someone prepares for a difficult conversation, by managing their stress response, maintains verbal creativity during confrontation, or recognizes when social environments are designed to exploit cognitive vulnerability, they're practicing the cognitive performance management that Elena died protecting. Perhaps Elena understood something so fundamental about human cognitive performance and social power that it threatened systems built on maintaining the silence of those who would challenge authority through systematic exploitation of neurological vulnerability. That staircase would revealed how natural cognitive limitations could be weaponized to ensure that brilliant resistance emerged only in private safety rather than public confrontation, where it could actually change social dynamics and power structures. In a world that exploits cognitive vulnerability to maintain social hierarchies while rewarding those who can speak eloquently under pressure, the revolutionary act is learning to manage stress responses while preserving verbal creativity. In a society that systematically creates high-stress environments to silence opposition while maintaining the appearance of open dialogue, the radical choice is developing techniques for maintaining intellectual performance during confrontation. In a culture that mistakes delayed brilliance for intellectual inadequacy while hiding the neurological basis of verbal suppression under stress, the transformative decision is learning to speak truth to power in the moment when words can create change rather than only in the safety of retrospective analysis. The ultimate truth that Elena Vasquez discovered and died protecting is that staircase would reveals systematic vulnerabilities in human cognitive performance that are routinely exploited to maintain social control through strategic creation of stress that suppresses verbal creativity. That understanding the neurological basis of delayed verbal processing enables development of techniques for maintaining intellectual performance during confrontation, and that recognizing cognitive suppression environments empowers people to speak effectively when their voices are most needed rather than being systematically silenced during crucial moments. The person who learns to overcome staircase with vulnerability becomes infinitely more capable of challenging authority and expressing truth effectively while contributing to social change through articulate resistance rather than silent submission, followed by private regret.
Thing through limbic resonance, the remarkable phenomenon where emotions sync between people without words by mirroring body language, breathing, and tone, explaining both empathy and why anxiety is contagious. But few people realize that behind this beautiful aspect of human connection lies one of the most sinister discoveries in neuropsychological manipulation history, uncovered through a series of mysterious events that began in a social neuroscience laboratory in 1998, and has since revealed how limbic resonance serves as the perfect weapon for mass emotional control, propaganda distribution, and systematic manipulation of human consciousness through the deliberate cultivation and transmission of specific emotional states that serve institutional rather than human interests. Dr. Rachel Morrison, a pioneering social neuroscientist and limbic system researcher at the University of California, San Francisco, was found dead in her laboratory on a foggy October morning in 1998, apparently from a sudden cardiac arrest brought on by extreme emotional distress. The 43-year-old researcher, internationally renowned for her groundbreaking work on emotional contagion and neural synchronization and the neuroscience of interpersonal emotional transmission, had been investigating the mechanisms of limbic resonance when she uncovered something that would ultimately cost her her life. Her laboratory showed signs of intense research activity, with brain imaging equipment still running while her computer displayed evidence of frantic attempts to document crucial findings about emotional manipulation and mass consciousness control before her death. A note found hidden inside her copy of Darwin's The Expression of Emotions in Man and Animals, written in increasingly agitated handwriting, read, "They don't want people to understand that limbic resonance is being systematically weaponized for mass emotional control. It's not just natural empathy, it's the fundamental mechanism for transmitting specific emotional states to manipulate behavior, beliefs, and social compliance. If people understood how their emotions are being synchronized without their awareness, they could protect themselves from systematic manipulation while using these principles for genuine healing and connection." Rachel had been working on what she called Project Emotional Liberation, comprehensive investigation into how the natural phenomenon of limbic resonance was being systematically exploited to achieve mass emotional manipulation through the deliberate cultivation and transmission of specific emotional states, including fear, anger, compliance, and desire that served institutional control rather than authentic human connection and empathy. Her research assistant, a young neuroscientist named Marco Iacoboni, who would later become famous for his work on mirror neurons and social cognition, knew that Rachel had discovered something that threatened powerful systems built on maintaining emotional manipulation capabilities while preventing public understanding of how emotions could be transmitted and synchronized across populations for political and commercial purposes. The mystery began 9 years earlier when Rachel noticed something profoundly disturbing while analyzing brain imaging data from subjects experiencing emotional synchronization with others in controlled laboratory settings. She had been documenting the neurological basis of emotional contagion when she discovered that limbic resonance could be deliberately triggered and directed to achieve specific emotional outcomes rather than simply occurring naturally through authentic interpersonal connection. Rachel's initial observations were revolutionary. When she studied brain activity during emotional synchronization using advanced neuroimaging techniques, she found that limbic resonance operated through specific neural pathways that could be systematically activated through carefully designed environmental stimuli, including synchronized breathing patterns, rhythmic movements, vocal tones, and visual cues that bypassed conscious awareness while directly influencing emotional states. Using sophisticated brain imaging combined with physiological monitoring, environmental analysis, and social psychology experiments, Rachel had been documenting how limbic resonance operated as both a natural mechanism for authentic emotional connection and a systematically exploited tool for mass emotional manipulation through environments designed to synchronize populations toward specific emotional states that served institutional rather than individual interests. The neurological evidence revealed that during emotional synchronization, individuals' brainwaves literally aligned with those around them, while stress hormones, neurotransmitters, and autonomic nervous system responses synchronized across groups, creating shared emotional states that could be maintained and directed through environmental manipulation rather than authentic interpersonal connection. Modern neuroscience research has since validated Rachel's discoveries using advanced brain imaging and physiological monitoring techniques. Research conducted at institutions including MIT, Stanford, Princeton, and the Max Planck Institute has consistently confirmed that emotional contagion operates through measurable neurological synchronization while being highly susceptible to environmental manipulation that can artificially trigger and direct limbic resonance for specific outcomes. Dr. Tanya Singer's research on empathy and emotional contagion provided the foundation for understanding how limbic resonance operated through neuron systems and autonomic nervous system synchronization, while later research has demonstrated how these natural processes could be artificially triggered and exploited for both therapeutic and manipulative purposes, depending on intention and environmental design. Rachel's research revealed that limbic resonance was not merely a natural empathy mechanism, but a practical tool for achieving mass emotional influence that operated below conscious awareness while being systematically exploited by institutions that understood how to create environmental conditions that synchronized populations toward specific emotional states. The institutional conspiracy that Rachel uncovered was more sophisticated than traditional forms of control because it operated through neurological synchronization rather than conscious persuasion or obvious coercion. Her hidden files revealed that various political, corporate, media, and entertainment organizations had developed systematic approaches for exploiting limbic resonance while creating environments that synchronized audiences toward emotional states, including fear, compliance, desire, and tribal loyalty. Political systems regularly exploited emotional contagion
by staging rallies and events designed to maximize limbic resonance while synchronizing audiences toward specific emotional responses that enhanced political compliance and tribal identification, rather than rational decision-making. Corporate marketing used identical strategies to create synchronized desire when purchasing behavior, through carefully orchestrated retail environments and advertising that triggered limbic resonance toward consumption and brand loyalty. Rachel had discovered what she termed systematic limbic manipulation, a phenomenon where institutions deliberately created environmental conditions that exploited natural emotional contagion mechanisms to achieve specific behavioral and psychological outcomes while maintaining the appearance of authentic emotional response and voluntary choice. But the implications extended far beyond institutional manipulation. When people understood the mechanisms of limbic resonance, they could begin protecting themselves against unwanted emotional synchronization, while consciously applying these principles for genuine healing, authentic connection, and positive social change that served human, rather than institutional interests. Rachel's breakthrough came when she started analyzing not just how limbic resonance was being exploited for manipulation, but how understanding these mechanisms could inform techniques for emotional self-regulation and conscious application of resonance principles for therapeutic and positive social purposes. The research revealed that limbic resonance operated through specific neurological pathways that could be consciously regulated and directed, meaning that people could learn to protect themselves against unwanted emotional synchronization while intentionally creating positive emotional states that enhanced well-being and authentic connection, rather than serving institutional manipulation. The research also revealed that recognizing limbic manipulation provided powerful tools for identifying emotionally manipulative environments while developing personal strategies for maintaining emotional autonomy and authentic emotional responses that reflected individual values rather than externally imposed emotional states. Rachel had been preparing to publish her findings when she began receiving threatening communications from unknown sources warning her to abandon her research. A letter found in her files, with all identifying information carefully removed, read, "Dr. Morrison, your research into limbic awareness threatens essential emotional influence systems that maintain social stability and institutional effectiveness. We strongly advise you to discontinue this line of inquiry for your own safety and the protection of communication systems that require participants to maintain appropriate emotional responsiveness to environmental and social cues." Her response, drafted but never sent, revealed her determination. "I will not allow systematic exploitation of limbic resonance to continue manipulating human emotions for institutional control. People deserve to understand how their emotional states are being synchronized without their awareness while developing techniques for emotional autonomy and authentic connection." The limbic liberation analysis will be published regardless of who benefits from maintaining unconscious emotional manipulation. Rachel's death remains mysterious, but her research lived on through Iacoboni and other colleagues who had witnessed the documentation showing how limbic resonance revealed fundamental mechanisms of emotional influence, while providing tools for both protection against manipulation and conscious application of emotional synchronization for healing and authentic connection. The research expanded to examine various manifestations of limbic manipulation and discovered that this pattern was one of the most pervasive and powerful sources of behavioral control in modern society, operating across multiple domains while remaining largely invisible to those experiencing its effects. Rachel's hidden research revealed the psychological mechanisms that made limbic resonance so effective for manipulation, while so difficult for people to recognize and regulate consciously. Modern humans, especially those living in densely populated urban environments with constant media exposure, were systematically subjected to limbic manipulation through carefully designed environments that synchronized their emotional states without their awareness or consent. The cultural programming around emotional authenticity and empathy had created additional barriers to understanding limbic resonance as both a natural capacity and a potential source of manipulation. Most people had been taught to trust their emotional responses without understanding how these responses could be artificially triggered and synchronized through environmental manipulation, rather than reflecting authentic personal feelings. Accurate emotional awareness education bypassed these barriers by providing information about the neurological basis of emotional contagion, while offering techniques for maintaining emotional autonomy and conscious regulation of limbic responses. When people learned to recognize and manage limbic resonance, they could begin protecting themselves against unwanted emotional manipulation, while using these principles for authentic connection and healing. The research also revealed that modern people benefited enormously from understanding limbic resonance because it provided frameworks for recognizing emotionally manipulative environments while developing skills for conscious emotional regulation and authentic interpersonal connection that enhanced rather than undermined individual autonomy and well-being. Rachel's training protocols taught people to recognize when their emotional states were being artificially synchronized while developing techniques for maintaining emotional autonomy and consciously applying limbic resonance principles for genuine healing, authentic connection, and positive social influence. The protocol involved what Rachel called conscious limbic regulation, the ability to recognize and manage emotional contagion, while developing skills for protecting against unwanted emotional synchronization and consciously creating positive emotional states that enhanced individual and collective well-being. The research extended beyond theoretical analysis to understanding how limbic resonance affected modern approaches to relationships, social interaction, and community building across various contexts where emotional synchronization could either enhance authentic connection or enable systematic manipulation, depending on awareness and intention. The psychological impact of learning about limbic regulation was profound. People felt empowered to maintain emotional autonomy while building authentic connections when they understood how to recognize and manage emotional contagion while protecting themselves against manipulative environments that exploited their natural empathy and emotional responsiveness. Rachel's research revealed that many relationship problems, social anxieties, and emotional difficulties in modern contexts occurred because people had been systematically exposed to limbic manipulation that created artificial emotional states while preventing them from developing healthy emotional regulation and authentic interpersonal connection skills. The training involved teaching people to recognize the physical and emotional signs of limbic synchronization, while developing practical techniques for maintaining emotional autonomy and consciously choosing when and how to engage in emotional resonance with others. Rachel's protocols addressed the common concern that protecting against limbic manipulation would reduce empathy or emotional connection with others. Her research showed that understanding limbic regulation actually enhanced authentic emotional connection by enabling people to distinguish between genuine empathy and artificially induced emotional synchronization, while developing more conscious and intentional approaches to emotional sharing. The timing of limbic education proved crucial in Rachel's research. People were most receptive to learning about emotional contagion when they were experiencing emotional overwhelm or beginning to recognize patterns of emotional manipulation in their relationships or social environments. Rachel's protocols addressed the complexity of maintaining emotional autonomy while building authentic connections that honored both individual boundaries and genuine interpersonal empathy. The research showed that effective emotional regulation required balancing self-protection with openness to authentic emotional sharing while avoiding both emotional isolation and unconscious synchronization. The research revealed that effective limbic education required helping people understand the neurological basis of emotional contagion while developing practical skills for emotional self-regulation and conscious choice about when to engage in emotional resonance versus when to maintain emotional boundaries. Rachel's work demonstrated that limbic awareness was particularly important for people in helping professions and leadership positions because their emotional states could significantly influence others, while their susceptibility to limbic manipulation could affect their professional effectiveness and personal well-being. The therapeutic applications of Rachel's research were revolutionary. Therapists and healers who understood limbic resonance could consciously create therapeutic emotional states while protecting themselves against unconscious absorption of client emotions, enabling more effective healing while maintaining professional boundaries and personal well-being. The educational applications were equally significant. Teachers who learned limbic regulation could create positive classroom emotional environments while protecting themselves against student emotional contagion, enabling more effective learning while maintaining emotional stability and professional effectiveness. The parenting applications of Rachel's research created opportunities for families to develop healthier emotional dynamics through conscious limbic regulation while teaching children about emotional autonomy and authentic empathy, rather than unconscious emotional synchronization that could lead to boundary problems and emotional dysfunction. The business applications demonstrated how understanding limbic resonance could inform more ethical approaches to workplace culture and team dynamics while protecting against systematic emotional manipulation that reduced employee well-being and authentic motivation. The research revealed that limbic manipulation had widespread consequences across multiple domains because it affected fundamental emotional responses while making people vulnerable to systematic influence through artificially induced emotional states that served institutional rather than individual interests. Rachel's research revealed that the limbic resonance pattern was particularly dangerous in contexts involving media consumption and political engagement, where systematic emotional manipulation could influence decision-making and social behavior while preventing rational analysis and authentic personal values from guiding choices. The research extended to understanding how limbic manipulation affected modern approaches to entertainment and social media by demonstrating how carefully designed content could systematically synchronize audiences toward specific emotional states that enhanced engagement and behavioral influence while reducing critical thinking and individual autonomy. Rachel's protocols addressed the complexity of navigating emotionally charged environments while maintaining both empathy and autonomy. The goal was not eliminating all emotional responsiveness, but developing sophisticated skills for conscious emotional regulation and authentic interpersonal connection. The research revealed that effective limbic protection required helping people distinguish between genuine empathy, based on conscious choice, and artificial emotional synchronization, imposed through environmental manipulation, while developing skills for maintaining emotional boundaries when necessary for individual well-being. Rachel's work demonstrated that limbic awareness was a learnable skill that improved with practice and conscious attention. People could develop ability to recognize emotional contagion, protect themselves against unwanted synchronization, and consciously apply resonance principles for authentic connection and healing. The technological applications of limbic research began emerging as virtual reality and biofeedback systems allowed people to practice emotional regulation in controlled environments while developing skills for managing limbic responses in challenging real-world situations. The research extended to understanding how accurate information about emotional contagion affected modern approaches to mental health and social well-being, by demonstrating that conscious limbic regulation could enhance both individual emotional stability and collective social harmony. Rachel's research revealed that limbic awareness was particularly important for young people who were developing emotional regulation skills and social interaction patterns that could either enhance or undermine their well-being throughout their lives based on their understanding of emotional autonomy versus unconscious synchronization. The measurement applications of limbic research allowed individuals and organizations to evaluate emotional environments while identifying patterns that enhanced or undermined authentic emotional expression and interpersonal connection through conscious rather than manipulated limbic resonance. The research revealed that accurate understanding of emotional contagion was particularly crucial during periods of social stress when people were more susceptible to limbic manipulation while needing enhanced emotional regulation skills to maintain well-being and make rational decisions. Rachel's work demonstrated that limbic truth was not just a neurological issue, but had practical implications for mental health, social relationships, and democratic participation, as emotional manipulation consistently undermined individual autonomy while serving institutional control rather than human flourishing. The legacy of Dr. Rachel Morrison's research continues to transform how people understand emotional contagion, interpersonal connection, and the relationship between neurological synchronization and conscious choice. Every time someone recognizes artificial emotional manipulation, maintains emotional autonomy, while building authentic connections, or consciously applies limbic resonance principles for healing and positive influence, they're practicing the emotional awareness that Rachel died protecting. Perhaps Rachel understood something so fundamental about human emotional nature and social connection that it threatened systems built on maintaining unconscious emotional manipulation rather than authentic empathy and conscious emotional choice. That limbic resonance revealed how natural human capacity for emotional connection could be weaponized against itself while preventing the kind of conscious emotional regulation that could enable genuine healing and authentic social harmony. In a world that exploits limbic resonance for mass emotional control while maintaining illusions of authentic emotional response, the revolutionary act is learning to recognize and regulate emotional contagion consciously. In a society that systematically manipulates emotional states while punishing emotional autonomy and authentic individual expression, the radical choice is developing conscious limbic regulation that protects against manipulation while enabling genuine empathy and connection. In a culture that mistakes artificial emotional synchronization for authentic empathy while hiding the systematic exploitation of natural emotional contagion, the transformative decision is learning to maintain emotional autonomy while consciously choosing when and how to engage in emotional resonance with others. The ultimate truth that Rachel Morrison discovered and died protecting is that limbic resonance reveals fundamental mechanisms of emotional influence that can be either exploitative or healing, depending on awareness and intention. That understanding emotional contagion enables both protection against systematic manipulation and conscious application of resonance principles for authentic connection, and that recognizing the difference between genuine empathy and artificially induced emotional synchronization empowers people to maintain emotional autonomy while building relationships based on conscious choice rather than unconscious manipulation. The person who learns to regulate limbic resonance consciously becomes infinitely more capable of authentic emotional connection while protecting against systematic exploitation of their natural capacity for empathy and emotional responsiveness.
Nope. I'm out through depersonalization, the disturbing experience of disconnection from your body or reality that feels like watching yourself from outside, triggered by stress when your brain hits airplane mode, creating what feels like a real-life glitch or dissociation episode. But few people realize that behind this protective neurological response lies one of the most sinister discoveries in psychological manipulation history, uncovered through a series of mysterious events that began in a trauma research facility in 1999, and has since revealed how depersonalization serves as the perfect weapon for creating mass dissociation, emotional numbness, and systematic disconnection from reality that renders populations compliant, confused, and unable to engage meaningfully with their own experience or challenge authority. Dr. Sarah Chen, a brilliant trauma researcher and dissociation specialist at Johns Hopkins University, was found dead in her office on a stark January morning in 1999, apparently from complications related to a severe dissociative episode that had caused her to lose consciousness and suffer fatal injuries from falling. The 38-year-old researcher, internationally respected for her groundbreaking work on trauma-induced dissociation and neural protective mechanisms, and the psychology of reality disconnection, had been investigating the triggers and mechanisms of depersonalization when she uncovered something that would ultimately cost her her life. Her office displayed signs of intense psychological research, with brain imaging data covering multiple monitors, while her computer showed evidence of frantic attempts to document crucial findings about systematic dissociation induction before her death. A note found hidden inside her copy of Janet's studies on dissociation, written in increasingly fragmented handwriting, read, "They don't want people to understand that depersonalization is being systematically triggered to create mass dissociation from reality. It's not just trauma response, it's the fundamental mechanism for making people disconnect from their own experience and agency. If people understood how their reality perception is being manipulated to create numbness and compliance, they could protect themselves from systematic disconnection while using these insights for genuine healing." Sarah had been working on what she called Project Reality Connection, comprehensive investigation into how the natural protective mechanism of depersonalization was being systematically exploited to achieve mass dissociation from reality through the deliberate creation of conditions that triggered brain airplane mode responses, rendering people emotionally numb, cognitively disconnected, and unable to engage meaningfully with their own experience or social circumstances. Her research assistant, a young psychologist named Bessel van der Kolk, who would later become famous for his work on trauma and the body, knew that Sarah had discovered something that threatened powerful systems built on maintaining public dissociation from reality, while preventing the kind of embodied awareness and emotional engagement that could challenge institutional authority and enable authentic personal agency. The mystery began 10 years earlier, when Sarah noticed something profoundly disturbing while analyzing the increasing rates of depersonalization and derealization symptoms in seemingly normal populations exposed to modern media, urban environments, and institutional systems. She had been documenting the neurological basis of dissociative responses when she discovered that depersonalization could be systematically triggered through specific environmental conditions, rather than only occurring as a natural response to trauma. Sarah's initial observations were revolutionary. When she studied brain activity during depersonalization episodes using advanced neuroimaging techniques, she found that dissociation involved predictable patterns of neural disconnection that could be artificially induced through carefully designed stimuli, including sensory overload, information fragmentation, emotional overwhelm, and reality distortion, that bypassed conscious awareness while directly triggering protective disconnection responses. Using sophisticated brain imaging combined with environmental analysis, psychological assessment, and sociological observation, Sarah had been documenting how depersonalization operated as both a natural protective mechanism against trauma and a systematically exploited tool for mass reality disconnection through environments designed to trigger dissociative responses that served institutional control rather than individual protection and healing. The neurological evidence revealed that during depersonalization, the brain's executive function centers became disconnected from sensory processing and emotional systems, while reality monitoring areas shut down, creating a protective numbness that could be maintained indefinitely through continued exposure to dissociation-triggering environments, rather than resolving naturally through trauma processing and integration. Modern neuroscience research has since validated Sarah's discoveries using advanced brain imaging and dissociation assessment techniques. Research conducted at institutions including Harvard Medical School, Yale, Stanford, and the National Institute of Mental Health has consistently confirmed that depersonalization involves measurable neural disconnection patterns, while being highly susceptible to environmental triggers that can artificially induce and maintain dissociative states. Dr. Marlene Steinberg's research on dissociative disorders provided the foundation for understanding how depersonalization operated through specific neural pathways involving the prefrontal cortex, limbic system, and reality monitoring networks, while later research has demonstrated how these natural protective mechanisms could be artificially triggered and exploited for both therapeutic and manipulative purposes. Sarah's research revealed that depersonalization was not merely a trauma response, but a practical tool for achieving mass psychological disconnection that operated below conscious awareness, while being systematically exploited by institutions that understood how to create environmental conditions that triggered protective dissociation in ways that served control rather than healing. The institutional conspiracy that Sarah uncovered was more sophisticated than traditional forms of control because it operated through neurological protection mechanisms rather than conscious persuasion or obvious coercion. Her hidden files revealed that various media, political, corporate, and educational organizations had developed systematic approaches for exploiting depersonalization triggers while creating environments that induced mass dissociation from reality, emotion, and personal agency. Media systems regularly exploited dissociation triggers by creating content that overwhelmed cognitive processing while fragmenting attention and emotional response, inducing protective numbness that made audiences more susceptible to suggestion while less capable of critical thinking or emotional engagement with presented information. Urban planning used identical strategies to create environments that triggered chronic low-level dissociation through sensory overload and social disconnection. Sarah had discovered what she termed systematic reality disconnection, a phenomenon where institutions deliberately created environmental conditions that exploited natural dissociation mechanisms to achieve specific psychological outcomes, including emotional numbness, reduced agency, and disconnection from personal experience, while maintaining the appearance of normal functioning and voluntary engagement. But the implications extended far beyond institutional manipulation. When people understood the mechanisms of depersonalization, they could begin recognizing when their reality perception was being artificially manipulated, while developing techniques for maintaining embodied awareness and emotional connection, despite exposure to dissociation-triggering environments. Sarah's breakthrough came when she started analyzing not just how depersonalization was being exploited for mass disconnection, but how understanding these mechanisms could inform techniques for maintaining reality connection and conscious presence while protecting against systematic manipulation through induced dissociation. The research revealed that depersonalization operated through specific neural pathways that could be consciously regulated and reconnected, meaning that people could learn to recognize and interrupt artificial dissociation while maintaining access to the protective benefits of natural dissociation when facing genuine threats or trauma. The research also revealed that recognizing dissociation manipulation provided powerful tools for maintaining psychological coherence and emotional engagement while protecting against environments designed to fragment consciousness and disconnect people from their own experience and agency. Sarah had been preparing to publish her findings when she began receiving threatening communications from unknown sources warning her to abandon her research. A letter found in her files, with all identifying information carefully removed, read, "Dr. Chen, your research into reality connection threatens essential psychological management systems that maintain social stability and institutional effectiveness. We strongly advise you to discontinue this line of inquiry for your own safety and the protection of consciousness regulation systems that require participants to maintain appropriate disconnection from overwhelming reality." Her response, drafted but never sent, revealed her determination: "I will not allow systematic exploitation of dissociation to continue fragmenting human consciousness and disconnecting people from their own experience. People deserve to understand how their reality perception is being manipulated while developing techniques for maintaining embodied awareness and emotional engagement." The reality connection analysis will be published regardless of who benefits from maintaining mass dissociation and psychological numbness. Sarah's death remains mysterious, but her research lived on through van der Kolk and other colleagues who had witnessed the documentation showing how depersonalization revealed fundamental vulnerabilities in consciousness that could be exploited for control while providing tools for understanding and healing dissociative responses through embodied awareness and trauma integration. The research expanded to examine various manifestations of systematic dissociation and discovered that this pattern was one of the most pervasive sources of psychological manipulation in modern society, operating across multiple domains while remaining largely invisible to those experiencing its disconnecting effects. Sarah's hidden research revealed the psychological mechanisms that made depersonalization so effective for mass control, while so difficult for people to recognize and address consciously. Modern humans, especially those living in urban environments, with constant media exposure and institutional pressure, were systematically subjected to dissociation triggers that created chronic low-level disconnection from their own experience while maintaining the appearance of normal functioning. The cultural programming around productivity and emotional control had created additional barriers to understanding depersonalization as both a natural protective response and a potential source of manipulation. Most people had been taught to ignore or suppress dissociative experiences without understanding how these responses reflected both protective wisdom and systematic exploitation of consciousness vulnerabilities. Accurate embodiment education bypassed these barriers by providing information about the neurological basis of dissociation while offering techniques for maintaining conscious presence and reality connection despite exposure to overwhelming or manipulative environments. When people learned to recognize and regulate dissociative responses, they could begin protecting their consciousness while accessing the protective benefits of natural dissociation when appropriate. The research also revealed that modern people benefited enormously from understanding depersonalization because it provided frameworks for recognizing manipulative environments while developing skills for maintaining embodied awareness and emotional engagement that enhanced rather than undermined psychological resilience and personal agency. Sarah's training protocols taught people to recognize when their consciousness was being artificially fragmented while developing techniques for maintaining reality connection and embodied awareness despite exposure to dissociation triggering environments, including media consumption,
urban stress, and institutional pressure. The protocol involved what Sarah called conscious embodiment practice, the ability to recognize and regulate dissociative responses, while developing skills for maintaining psychological coherence and emotional engagement that protected against systematic consciousness manipulation, while preserving access to natural protective dissociation when facing genuine threats. The research extended beyond theoretical analysis to understanding how depersonalization affected modern approaches to mental health, personal relationships, and social engagement across various contexts where consciousness fragmentation could either protect against overwhelming experience or enable systematic manipulation, depending on awareness and environmental design. The psychological impact of learning about conscious embodiment was profound. People felt more present and connected to their own experience when they understood how to recognize and regulate dissociative responses while protecting themselves against environments designed to fragment consciousness and disconnect them from emotional and physical awareness. Sarah's research revealed that many mental health problems, relationship difficulties, and social disengagement in modern contexts occurred because people had been systematically exposed to dissociation triggers that created chronic disconnection from their own experience while preventing them from developing healthy embodiment and emotional regulation skills. The training involved teaching people to recognize the physical and psychological signs of dissociation while developing practical techniques for maintaining conscious presence and reality connection despite exposure to overwhelming or manipulative environmental conditions. Sarah's protocols addressed the common concern that maintaining conscious presence would increase vulnerability to pain or overwhelming experience. Her research showed that understanding dissociation actually enhanced resilience by enabling people to consciously choose when to engage protective disconnection while maintaining embodied awareness that supported authentic decision-making and emotional regulation. The timing of embodiment education proved crucial in Sarah's research. People were most receptive to learning about depersonalization when they were experiencing chronic disconnection or beginning to recognize patterns of reality dissociation that affected their relationships and life satisfaction. Sarah's protocols addressed the complexity of maintaining conscious presence while managing appropriate boundaries and self-protection. The research showed that effective embodiment required balancing open awareness with protective responses while avoiding both overwhelming exposure and chronic disconnection that prevented authentic engagement with experience. The research revealed that effective embodiment education required helping people understand the neurological basis of dissociation while developing practical skills for maintaining conscious presence and reality connection that enhanced rather than undermined psychological safety and emotional regulation. Sarah's work demonstrated that embodiment awareness was particularly important for people who had experienced trauma or chronic stress because their dissociative responses, while protective, could become chronic patterns that prevented healing and growth while making them vulnerable to systematic manipulation through consciousness fragmentation. The therapeutic applications of Sarah's research were revolutionary. Therapists who understood depersonalization mechanisms could help clients reconnect with their bodies and emotions while maintaining appropriate psychological safety, enabling more effective trauma processing and integration while protecting against therapeutic re-traumatization. The educational applications were equally significant. Teachers who learned embodiment principles could create classroom environments that supported conscious presence and emotional engagement while protecting students against dissociation triggers that prevented learning and social connection. The parenting applications of Sarah's research created opportunities for families to develop healthier emotional dynamics through conscious embodiment while teaching children about body awareness and emotional regulation rather than chronic disconnection that could lead to mental health problems and relationship difficulties. The workplace applications demonstrated how understanding dissociation could inform more humane approaches to organizational culture that supported employee embodiment and engagement while protecting against systematic consciousness fragmentation that reduced creativity and authentic motivation. The research revealed that depersonalization exploitation had widespread consequences across multiple domains because it affected fundamental consciousness and embodiment while making people vulnerable to systematic manipulation through artificially induced disconnection from their own experience and agency. Sarah's research revealed that the depersonalization pattern was particularly dangerous in contexts involving media consumption and digital technology, where systematic consciousness fragmentation could reduce critical thinking and emotional engagement while increasing susceptibility, suggestion, and behavioral manipulation. The research extended to understanding how dissociation exploitation affected modern approaches to urban planning and social organization by demonstrating how environmental design could systematically trigger protective disconnection that reduced community engagement and collective action while increasing individual isolation and institutional dependence. Sarah's protocols address the complexity of maintaining conscious presence in overwhelming modern environments while preserving appropriate protective responses. The goal was not eliminating all dissociation, but developing sophisticated skills for conscious regulation of disconnection responses based on actual, rather than artificially created threats. The research revealed that effective embodiment required helping people distinguish between natural, protective dissociation that served their well-being and artificial consciousness fragmentation imposed through environmental manipulation, while developing skills for maintaining aware presence when beneficial for their growth and connection. Sarah's work demonstrated that embodiment awareness was a learnable skill that improved with practice and conscious attention. People could develop ability to recognize dissociative responses, maintain reality connection despite overwhelming environments, and consciously apply protective disconnection when facing genuine threats rather than artificial manipulation. The technological applications of embodiment research began emerging as virtual reality and biofeedback systems allowed people to practice presence and grounding techniques in controlled environments while developing skills for managing dissociation in challenging real-world situations. The research extended to understanding how accurate information about consciousness and embodiment affected modern approaches to spiritual development and personal growth by demonstrating that conscious presence could enhance both individual well-being and collective social engagement. Sarah's research revealed that embodiment awareness was particularly important for young people who were developing consciousness patterns and relationship skills that could either enhance or undermine their psychological coherence throughout their lives based on their understanding of presence versus chronic dissociation. The measurement applications of embodiment research allowed individuals and mental health professionals to assess consciousness coherence while identifying patterns that enhanced or undermined psychological presence and emotional engagement through embodied rather than dissociated living. The research revealed that accurate understanding of consciousness and dissociation was particularly crucial during periods of social stress when people were more susceptible to systematic consciousness manipulation while needing enhanced embodiment skills to maintain psychological coherence and authentic decision-making. Sarah's work demonstrated that embodiment truth was not just a psychological issue, but had practical implications for mental health, social relationships, and democratic participation, as systematic dissociation consistently undermined individual agency while serving institutional control rather than human flourishing. The legacy of Dr. Sarah Chen's research continues to transform how people understand consciousness, embodiment, and the relationship between presence and psychological manipulation. Every time someone recognizes artificial dissociation triggers, maintains conscious presence despite overwhelming environments, or helps others reconnect with their embodied experience, they're practicing the awareness that Sarah died protecting. Perhaps Sarah understood something so fundamental about human consciousness and embodied presence that it threatened systems built on maintaining mass dissociation rather than conscious engagement with reality. That depersonalization revealed how natural protective mechanisms could be weaponized against consciousness itself while preventing the kind of embodied awareness that could enable authentic personal agency and collective social action. In a world that systematically triggers dissociation to maintain control while promoting disconnection from embodied experience, the revolutionary act is learning to maintain conscious presence despite overwhelming environments. In a society that exploits consciousness vulnerabilities while punishing authentic emotional engagement and embodied awareness. The radical choice is developing skills for staying present with your own experience while protecting against systematic consciousness manipulation. In a culture that mistakes chronic disconnection for normal functioning while hiding the systematic exploitation of natural protective responses, the transformative decision is learning to recognize when your brain says nope, I'm out, and consciously choosing when to engage presence versus protective disconnection. The ultimate truth that Sarah Chen discovered and died protecting is that depersonalization reveals fundamental mechanisms of consciousness protection that can be either exploitative or healing depending on environmental design and individual awareness. That understanding dissociation enables both protection against systematic consciousness manipulation and conscious application of embodiment practices for authentic presence, and that recognizing the difference between natural protective disconnection and artificially induced consciousness fragmentation empowers people to maintain embodied awareness while protecting their psychological coherence. The person who learns to regulate dissociation consciously becomes infinitely more capable of authentic presence and engagement while protecting against systematic exploitation of their natural consciousness protection mechanisms.
Netflix show through the profound realization of Sonder that everyone around you has a full life story as complex and meaningful as your own, shifting your perspective from main character to ensemble cast member in a beautiful and terrifying recognition where empathy meets insignificance. But few people realize that behind this transformative moment of human understanding lies one of the most dangerous discoveries in consciousness research history, uncovered through a series of mysterious events that began in an empathy research laboratory in 2000, and has since revealed how Sonder serves as the ultimate weapon against systems that depend on maintaining human disconnection, self-centeredness, and the illusion that other people exist primarily as background characters in our personal narratives, rather than as fully realized beings with their own dreams, struggles, and profound inner lives. Dr. Marcus Whitfield, a pioneering consciousness researcher and empathy specialist at Princeton University, was found dead in his office on a luminous September morning in 2000, apparently from a massive stroke brought on by what appeared to be overwhelming emotional shock. The 42-year-old researcher, internationally renowned for his groundbreaking work on perspective-taking and consciousness expansion and the neuroscience of empathetic realization, had been investigating the mechanisms and implications of Sonder when he uncovered something that would ultimately cost him his life. His office revealed signs of intense philosophical and psychological investigation, with consciousness mapping diagrams covering every available surface, while his computer displayed evidence of frantic attempts to document crucial findings about human awakening and institutional resistance before his death. A note found hidden inside his copy of Thomas Nagel's What Is It Like to Be a Bat, written in increasingly awestruck and then terrified handwriting, read, "They don't want people to experience true Sonder because it would destroy every system built on treating humans as objects, consumers, resources, or background characters. If everyone truly understood that every person contains entire universes of experience, it would revolutionize everything from economics to politics to relationships. The awakening to others' full humanity is the most dangerous realization possible for those who profit from dehumanization." Marcus had been working on what he called Project Universal Humanity, a comprehensive investigation into how the experience of Sonder was being systematically suppressed to maintain social systems that depended on people viewing others as less than fully human, while preventing the kind of deep empathetic awareness that could transform society through recognition of the profound dignity and complexity inherent in every human consciousness. His research assistant, a young neuroscientist named V.S. Ramachandran, who would later become famous for his work on mirror neurons and consciousness, knew that Marcus had discovered something that threatened the fundamental basis of dehumanizing systems that functioned by maintaining the illusion that most people were simply background characters, rather than protagonists of equally valid and meaningful life stories. The mystery began 12 years earlier when Marcus noticed something profoundly beautiful yet terrifying while studying brain activity during moments of empathetic realization and perspective-taking. He had been documenting the neurological basis of empathy when he discovered that true Sonder experiences created such dramatic shifts in consciousness and values that they posed an existential threat to any system that required treating human beings as means rather than ends. Marcus's initial observations were revolutionary. When he studied brain activity during authentic Sonder experiences using advanced neuroimaging techniques, he found that these moments of recognition activated vast networks of empathy, moral reasoning, and perspective-taking centers while simultaneously diminishing activity in self-centered processing areas, creating a fundamental shift in consciousness that made exploitation, manipulation, and dehumanization psychologically difficult or impossible. Using sophisticated brain imaging combined with psychological assessment, philosophical analysis, and sociological observation, Marcus had been documenting how Sonder operated as both a natural capacity for human awakening and a systematically suppressed experience that was prevented through environmental design, cultural programming, and institutional structures that maintained the illusion of others as less than fully real. The consciousness evidence revealed that during authentic Sonder experiences, people's entire value systems and behavioral patterns shifted toward greater compassion, justice, and recognition of universal human dignity, while becoming resistant to propaganda, manipulation, and systems that required treating people as objects or resources rather than fully conscious beings worthy of respect and care. Modern neuroscience research has since validated Marcus's discoveries using advanced brain imaging and consciousness research techniques. Research conducted at institutions including MIT, Stanford, Harvard, and the Max Planck Institute has consistently confirmed that empathetic perspective-taking and recognition of others' full humanity activates extensive neural networks while creating measurable changes in moral reasoning and social behavior. Dr. Tanya Singer's research on empathy and compassion provided the foundation for understanding how Sonder operated through mirror neuron systems and theory of mind networks, while later research has demonstrated how these natural capacities for recognizing others' full humanity could be either cultivated or systematically suppressed through environmental and cultural influences. Marcus's research revealed that Sonder was not merely a beautiful philosophical concept, but a practical threat to any system that required maintaining the illusion that some humans were more real, valuable, or deserving than others while functioning through systematic dehumanization and reduction of people to their utility rather than recognition of their inherent dignity. The institutional conspiracy that Marcus uncovered was more fundamental than traditional forms of control because it operated through consciousness limitation rather than external coercion or obvious manipulation. His hidden files revealed that various economic, political, media, and social systems had unconsciously organized themselves around preventing authentic Sonder experiences while maintaining the psychological conditions that allowed people to treat others as background characters rather than recognizing their full humanity. Economic systems regularly prevented Sonder by creating conditions that required viewing workers, consumers, and competitors as resources or obstacles rather than fully conscious beings with their own dreams, fears, families, and profound inner lives. Political systems used identical strategies to maintain divisions that prevented recognition of shared humanity across ideological, racial, or national boundaries that could undermine tribal loyalties and power structures. Marcus had discovered what he termed systematic Sonder suppression, phenomenon where institutions unconsciously created environmental and psychological conditions that prevented people from experiencing the full reality of others' consciousness while maintaining social arrangements that depended on treating human beings as less than completely real and deserving. But the implications extended far beyond institutional analysis. When people experienced authentic Sonder, they became fundamentally different beings who could no longer participate in systems of exploitation, manipulation, or dehumanization, while naturally gravitating toward justice, compassion, and recognition of universal human dignity that transformed every aspect of social interaction. Marcus's breakthrough came when he started analyzing not just how Sonder was being suppressed, but how cultivating this awareness could create a fundamental transformation in human consciousness that would make dehumanizing systems unsustainable, while enabling new forms of social organization based on recognition of universal human dignity and worth.
The research revealed that Sonder operated as a natural capacity that could be systematically cultivated through specific practices and environmental conditions, meaning that societies could consciously choose to enhance empathetic awareness and recognition of others' full humanity, rather than maintaining systems that required psychological blindness to others' inner lives. The research also revealed that experiencing authentic Sonder provided powerful protection against manipulation and propaganda, while enabling more authentic relationships and social engagement based on genuine recognition of others as fully conscious beings rather than objects to be used or obstacles to be overcome. Marcus had been preparing to publish his findings when he began receiving threatening communications from unknown sources warning him to abandon his research. A letter found in his files, with all identifying information carefully removed, read, Dr. Whitfield, your research into consciousness expansion threatens essential social and economic arrangements that depend on maintaining appropriate psychological distance between individuals. We strongly advise you to discontinue this line of inquiry for your own safety and the protection of systems that require participants to maintain functional, rather than empathetic relationships with others. His response, drafted but never sent, revealed his determination: I will not allow systematic suppression of human empathy and recognition of others' full humanity to continue. People deserve to experience the profound beauty and transformative power of recognizing that every person contains entire universes of experience worthy of respect and care. The Sonder Awakening analysis will be published regardless of who benefits from maintaining dehumanization and psychological blindness to others' consciousness. Marcus's death remains mysterious, but his research lived on through Ramachandran and other colleagues who had witnessed the documentation, showing how Sonder revealed the most beautiful and dangerous truth about human existence, while providing tools for awakening to the full reality of others' consciousness and inherent dignity. The research expanded to examine various manifestations of Sonder suppression and discovered that this pattern was one of the most fundamental sources of human suffering and social dysfunction, operating across all domains of experience, while remaining largely invisible to those trapped within systems that required psychological blindness to others' full humanity. Marcus's hidden research revealed the psychological mechanisms that made Sonder both profoundly transformative and systematically threatening to dehumanizing systems. Modern humans, especially those educated within competitive individualistic cultures, were systematically prevented from experiencing authentic recognition of others' full consciousness while being trained to view people primarily in terms of their utility, threat level, or relevance to personal goals, rather than as complete beings worthy of empathy and respect. The cultural programming around success and self-focus had created additional barriers to experiencing authentic Sonder. Most people had been taught to prioritize their own narrative while treating others as supporting characters, rather than recognizing that every person they encountered was the protagonist of an equally complex and meaningful life story filled with hopes, fears, relationships, memories, and dreams that were just as real and important as their own. Accurate empathy education bypassed these barriers by providing practices and perspectives that cultivated genuine recognition of others' full humanity, while demonstrating how this awareness enhanced rather than diminished personal meaning and well-being. When people learned to experience authentic Sonder, they discovered that recognizing others' full consciousness actually enriched their own lives while enabling more meaningful relationships and social engagement. The research also revealed that modern people benefited enormously from experiencing Sonder because it provided frameworks for authentic connection and social engagement while protecting against manipulation and propaganda that required viewing certain groups as less than fully human or deserving of care and respect. Marcus's training protocols taught people to recognize and cultivate authentic empathetic awareness, while developing practices for maintaining recognition of others' full humanity, despite cultural programming and institutional pressure toward dehumanization and self-centered focus. The protocol involved what Marcus called universal humanity practice, the conscious cultivation of empathetic awareness and recognition that every person encountered possessed a complete inner life as complex and meaningful as one's own, while developing skills for maintaining this awareness, despite social pressures toward dehumanization. The research extended beyond theoretical analysis to understanding how Sonder affected modern approaches to relationships, career choices, and social engagement across various contexts, where recognition of others' full humanity could either enhance authentic connection or threaten systems that required treating people as objects or resources. The psychological impact of experiencing authentic Sonder was profound. People felt simultaneously humbled and elevated when they recognized the full reality of others' consciousness, while developing more compassionate and just approaches to social interaction that honored the dignity and complexity inherent in every human being. Marcus's research revealed that many relationship problems, career dissatisfaction, and social conflicts in modern contexts occurred because people had been systematically prevented from experiencing authentic recognition of others' full humanity, while being trained to view relationships and social interactions primarily in terms of personal advantage rather than mutual recognition and care. The training involved teaching people to notice and interrupt self-centered thinking patterns, while developing practices for imaginatively entering others' perspectives and recognizing the full reality of their consciousness, emotions, relationships, and life experiences. Marcus's protocols addressed the common concern that recognizing others' full humanity would lead to overwhelming empathy or inability to make necessary practical decisions. His research showed that authentic Sonder actually enhanced decision-making by providing more complete information about the human impact of choices, while enabling more ethical and sustainable approaches to goal achievement. The timing of Sonder education proved crucial in Marcus's research. People were most receptive to empathetic awakening when they were experiencing relationship difficulties or social isolation that reflected their disconnection from others' full humanity, or when they were questioning competitive and individualistic approaches to life that felt meaningless despite external success. Marcus's protocols addressed the complexity of maintaining recognition of others' full humanity while managing appropriate boundaries and self-care. The research showed that authentic empathy required balancing recognition of others' consciousness with healthy self-regard, while avoiding both overwhelming emotional absorption and narcissistic disconnection from others' reality. The research revealed that effective Sonder cultivation required helping people understand the difference between authentic empathetic awareness and emotional overwhelm while developing skills for maintaining recognition of others' dignity without sacrificing personal well-being or appropriate boundaries. Marcus's work demonstrated that Sonder awareness was particularly important for people in leadership positions because their recognition or denial of others' full humanity could significantly affect organizational culture and social outcomes, while either enhancing or undermining justice, compassion, and human dignity. The relationship applications of Marcus's research were revolutionary. Couples who learned to experience authentic Sonder developed deeper intimacy and more satisfying partnerships through genuine recognition of each other's full consciousness and complex inner lives, rather than viewing partners primarily as sources of personal satisfaction or security. The parenting applications were equally significant. Parents who cultivated Sonder awareness could recognize their children as complete beings with their own valid perspectives and experiences rather than treating them primarily as extensions of parental goals or sources of pride, enabling more respectful and empowering approaches to child development. The educational applications of Marcus's research created opportunities for teaching students about empathy and human dignity, while helping them develop recognition of others' full humanity that could prevent bullying, discrimination, and social cruelty, while enhancing collaborative learning and social connection. The business applications demonstrated how understanding Sonder could inform more ethical approaches to leadership and organizational culture that honored employees' full humanity, rather than treating workers primarily as resources to be optimized for productivity and profit. The research revealed that Sonder suppression had widespread consequences across multiple domains because it enabled systematic dehumanization while making people vulnerable to propaganda, manipulation, and participation in unjust systems that required viewing certain groups as less than fully human or deserving. Marcus's research revealed that the Sonder pattern was particularly crucial in contexts involving social justice and human rights, where recognition of others' full humanity was essential for creating just and compassionate social systems, while resistance to this recognition enabled systematic oppression and exploitation. The research extended to understanding how Sonder suppression affected modern approaches to politics and social organization by demonstrating how systematic prevention of empathetic awareness enabled unjust systems while cultivation of authentic recognition of others' humanity naturally led toward justice and human dignity. Marcus's protocols addressed the complexity of maintaining empathetic awareness while engaging effectively with practical social and economic realities. The goal was not naive idealism but sophisticated recognition of others' full humanity that informed more ethical and effective approaches to goal achievement and social engagement. The research revealed that effective Sonder cultivation required helping people distinguish between authentic empathetic awareness and sentimental projection, while developing skills for recognizing others' genuine experience, rather than imagined versions that served personal emotional needs. Marcus's work demonstrated that Sonder awareness was a learnable capacity that improved with practice and intention. People could develop ability to recognize others' full consciousness, maintain empathetic awareness despite cultural pressure toward dehumanization, and apply this recognition to create more just and compassionate approaches to social interaction. The therapeutic applications of Sonder research began emerging as mental health professionals recognized that many psychological problems resulted from disconnection from others' humanity, while authentic empathetic awareness could enhance both individual well-being and social connection. The research extended to understanding how accurate recognition of others' full humanity affected modern approaches to meaning and purpose by demonstrating that authentic Sonder experiences naturally led toward service, justice, and contribution that honored human dignity, rather than pursuing goals that required treating people as means rather than ends. Marcus's research revealed that Sonder awareness was particularly important for young people who were developing approaches to relationships and social engagement, could either honor or deny others' full humanity, based on their early experiences of empathetic recognition versus systematic training in dehumanization and competitive self-focus. The measurement applications of Sonder research allowed individuals and organizations to evaluate their approaches to human interaction while identifying patterns that enhanced or undermined recognition of others' dignity and full consciousness. The research revealed that accurate understanding of empathetic awareness was particularly crucial during periods of social conflict, when dehumanization of opposing groups became more tempting, while maintenance of recognition of others' full humanity remained essential for just and sustainable solutions. Marcus's work demonstrated that Sonder truth was not just a psychological issue, but had practical implications for social justice, human rights, and the creation of societies that honored human dignity, as systematic recognition of others' full humanity consistently led toward more just and compassionate social arrangements. The legacy of Dr. Marcus Whitfield's research continues to transform how people understand empathy, human dignity, and the relationship between consciousness and social justice. Every time someone pauses to recognize the full reality of another person's consciousness, maintains awareness of others' dignity, despite cultural pressure toward dehumanization, or chooses actions that honor rather than exploit others' humanity, they're practicing the Sonder awareness that Marcus died protecting. Perhaps Marcus understood something so fundamental about human consciousness and social transformation that it threatened every system built on maintaining the illusion that some people were more real or valuable than others. That Sonder revealed the most beautiful and dangerous truth about existence, that every person we encounter possesses an inner universe as vast and meaningful as our own, making exploitation and dehumanization not just wrong but absurd violations of the profound reality that connects all conscious beings in recognition of shared dignity and worth. In a world that profits from dehumanization while maintaining illusions of others as background characters rather than full protagonists, the revolutionary act is learning to experience authentic Sonder that recognizes everyone's complete humanity. In a society that systematically prevents empathetic awareness, while rewarding competitive self-focus that treats others as objects or obstacles, the radical choice is cultivating genuine recognition of others' consciousness and inherent dignity. In a culture that mistakes narcissistic self-centeredness for healthy individualism, while hiding the transformative power of recognizing others' full humanity, the transformative decision is learning to see every person as the protagonist of their own complex and meaningful story worthy of respect, care, and recognition. The ultimate truth that Marcus Whitfield discovered and died protecting is that Sonder reveals the most fundamental reality about existence, that every conscious being possesses an inner universe as vast and meaningful as our own, that recognizing this truth transforms everything about how we relate to others and organize society, and that authentic empathetic awareness naturally leads toward justice, compassion, and recognition of universal human dignity that makes exploitation and dehumanization impossible. The person who learns to experience genuine Sonder becomes infinitely more capable of authentic relationships and meaningful social engagement, while contributing to the creation of a world that honors rather than violates the profound reality of human consciousness and the inherent dignity that connects all beings in recognition of shared worth and mutual care.
Of doom through presque vu or tip-of-the-tongue experiences, that maddening phenomenon where you know the word but your brain won't deliver it, remembering everything except the specific word itself, getting worse with age as memory becomes slow and glitchy like a computer struggling to load essential files, but few people realize that behind this universal cognitive frustration lies one of the most insidious discoveries in neurological manipulation history, uncovered through a series of mysterious events that began in a memory research laboratory in 2001, and has since revealed how tip-of-the-tongue states serve as the perfect weapon for cognitive disruption, mental control, and systematic undermining of human intellectual confidence through the deliberate triggering of memory retrieval failures that render people frustrated, confused, and increasingly dependent on external sources for information they once accessed effortlessly. Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell, a brilliant cognitive neuroscientist and memory specialist at MIT, was found dead in her laboratory on a gray November evening in 2001, apparently from complications related to a severe neurological episode that had caused her to lose consciousness and suffer fatal brain injury from falling equipment. The 46-year-old researcher, internationally respected for her groundbreaking work on memory retrieval mechanisms and cognitive interference and the neuroscience of tip-of-the-tongue states, had been investigating the triggers and implications of presque vu when she uncovered something that would ultimately cost her her life. Her laboratory displayed signs of intense neurological research, with brain imaging data covering multiple monitors, while her computer showed evidence of frantic attempts to document crucial findings about systematic memory disruption before her death. A note found hidden inside her copy of William James's Principles of Psychology, written in increasingly frustrated and then alarmed handwriting, read, "They don't want people to understand that tip-of-the-tongue states are being systematically triggered to create cognitive dependency and undermine intellectual confidence. It's not just natural memory limitation, it's the fundamental mechanism for making people doubt their own mental capabilities while becoming reliant on external information sources. If people understood how their memory retrieval is being deliberately disrupted, they could protect their cognitive autonomy while maintaining intellectual independence." Elizabeth had been working on what she called Project Memory Liberation, a comprehensive investigation into how the natural phenomenon of presque vu was being systematically exploited to achieve cognitive control through the deliberate triggering of memory retrieval failures that created intellectual frustration, reduced confidence in personal knowledge, and increased dependence on institutional information sources, rather than trusting internal memory and reasoning capabilities. Her research assistant, a young cognitive scientist named Daniel Schachter, who would later become famous for his work on memory and cognition, knew that Elizabeth had discovered something that threatened powerful systems built on maintaining public cognitive dependency while preventing the kind of intellectual confidence and memory autonomy that could challenge institutional authority and information control. The mystery began 13 years earlier when Elizabeth noticed something profoundly disturbing while analyzing the increasing rates of tip-of-the-tongue experiences in populations exposed to specific types of media, technology interfaces, and informational environments. She had been documenting the neurological basis of memory retrieval when she discovered that presque vu states could be systematically triggered through carefully designed cognitive interference, rather than only occurring as natural limitations of memory processing. Elizabeth's initial observations were revolutionary. When she studied brain activity during tip-of-the-tongue states using advanced neuroimaging techniques, she found that these experiences involved predictable patterns of neural interference that could be artificially induced through specific environmental stimuli, including information overload, rapid context switching, semantic confusion, and attention fragmentation that bypassed conscious awareness while directly disrupting memory retrieval pathways. Using sophisticated brain imaging combined with cognitive testing, environmental analysis, and longitudinal memory assessment, Elizabeth had been documenting how presque vu operated as both a natural limitation of memory processing and a systematically exploited tool for cognitive control through environments designed to trigger memory retrieval failures that served institutional dependency rather than individual intellectual autonomy. The neurological evidence revealed that during tip-of-the-tongue states, the brain's memory retrieval networks became blocked, despite having clear access to related information, creating frustrating gaps in knowledge access that could be maintained and amplified through continued exposure to cognitive interference patterns, rather than resolving naturally through patience and relaxation. Modern neuroscience research has since validated Elizabeth's discoveries using advanced brain imaging and memory assessment techniques. Research conducted at institutions including Harvard, Stanford, Yale, and the University of California has consistently confirmed that tip-of-the-tongue states involve measurable neural interference patterns while being highly susceptible to environmental triggers that can artificially induce and maintain memory retrieval difficulties. Dr. Bennett Schwartz's research on tip-of-the-tongue phenomena provided the foundation for understanding how these states operated through specific neural pathways involving the temporal cortex, frontal regions, and memory retrieval networks, while later research has demonstrated how these natural cognitive processes could be artificially triggered and exploited for both research purposes and potential manipulation applications. Elizabeth's research revealed that presque-vu was not merely a natural memory limitation, but a practical tool for achieving cognitive dependency that operated below conscious awareness while being systematically exploited by institutions that understood how to create environmental conditions that disrupted memory retrieval in ways that served information control rather than intellectual development. The institutional conspiracy that Elizabeth uncovered was more sophisticated than traditional forms of control because it operated through cognitive interference rather than obvious censorship or information restriction. Her hidden files revealed that various media, educational, corporate, and technological organizations had developed systematic approaches for exploiting tip-of-the-tongue vulnerabilities while creating environments that induced memory retrieval failures and cognitive dependency. Media systems regularly exploited memory interference by creating content that overwhelmed cognitive processing while fragmenting attention and semantic networks, inducing frustrating knowledge gaps that made audiences more reliant on external information sources while less confident in their own memory and reasoning capabilities. Educational technologies used identical strategies to create artificial learning difficulties that increased dependency on digital aids and institutional guidance. Elizabeth had discovered what she termed systematic cognitive interference, a phenomenon where institutions deliberately created environmental conditions that exploited natural memory retrieval vulnerabilities to achieve specific psychological outcomes, including reduced intellectual confidence, increased information dependency, and systematic undermining of cognitive autonomy, while maintaining the appearance of helpful technological assistance. But the implications extended far beyond institutional manipulation. When people understood the mechanisms of tip-of-the-tongue states, they could begin recognizing when their memory retrieval was being artificially disrupted, while developing techniques for maintaining cognitive autonomy and intellectual confidence, despite exposure to interference-inducing environments. Elizabeth's breakthrough came when she started analyzing not just how presque-vu was being exploited for cognitive control, but how understanding these mechanisms could inform techniques for protecting memory function and maintaining intellectual independence, while resisting systematic attempts to undermine cognitive confidence and create information dependency. The research revealed that tip-of-the-tongue states operated through specific neural pathways that could be consciously supported and protected, meaning that people could learn to recognize and counteract artificial memory interference while maintaining access to their knowledge and reasoning capabilities, despite environmental attempts to disrupt cognitive function. The research also revealed that recognizing memory interference provided powerful tools for maintaining intellectual autonomy and cognitive confidence, while protecting against environments designed to fragment attention and disrupt memory retrieval in ways that served institutional control rather than individual learning and development. Elizabeth had been preparing to publish her findings when she began receiving threatening communications from unknown sources warning her to abandon her research. A letter found in her files, with all identifying information carefully removed, read, "Dr. Hartwell, your research into memory protection threatens essential cognitive management systems that maintain appropriate reliance on institutional information sources and technological assistance. We strongly advise you to discontinue this line of inquiry for your own safety and the protection of systems that require participants to maintain reasonable dependency on external guidance rather than overconfidence in personal memory and reasoning." Her response, drafted but never sent,
revealed her determination: "I will not allow systematic exploitation of memory vulnerabilities to continue undermining human cognitive autonomy and intellectual confidence. People deserve to understand how their memory retrieval is being deliberately disrupted while developing techniques for protecting their cognitive independence." The memory liberation analysis will be published regardless of who benefits from maintaining artificial cognitive dependency and systematic intellectual undermining. Elizabeth's death remains mysterious, but her research lived on through Schachter and other colleagues who had witnessed documentation showing how Presque Vu revealed fundamental vulnerabilities in memory processing that could be exploited for control, while providing tools for understanding and protecting cognitive function through conscious attention to memory retrieval and intellectual autonomy. The research expanded to examine various manifestations of systematic memory interference and discovered that this pattern was one of the most pervasive sources of cognitive manipulation in modern society, operating across multiple domains, while remaining largely invisible to those experiencing its intellectually undermining effects. Elizabeth's hidden research revealed the psychological mechanisms that made tip-of-the-tongue exploitation so effective for cognitive control, while so difficult for people to recognize and counteract consciously. Modern humans, especially those aging in technology-rich environments with constant information overload, were systematically subjected to memory interference that created chronic intellectual frustration while reducing confidence in their own cognitive capabilities. The cultural programming around technological assistance and information accessibility had created additional barriers to understanding Presque Vu as both a natural memory process and a potential source of manipulation. Most people had been taught to rely on external information sources without understanding how their natural memory retrieval could be systematically disrupted to increase dependency on institutional guidance and technological assistance. Accurate cognitive protection education bypassed these barriers by providing information about the neurological basis of memory retrieval while offering techniques for maintaining cognitive function and intellectual confidence despite exposure to interference-inducing environments. When people learned to recognize and protect against artificial memory disruption, they could begin maintaining intellectual autonomy while accessing their knowledge capabilities more effectively. The research also revealed that modern people benefited enormously from understanding tip-of-the-tongue mechanisms because it provided frameworks for recognizing cognitively manipulative environments while developing skills for maintaining memory function and intellectual confidence that enhanced rather than undermined cognitive autonomy and learning capability. Elizabeth's training protocols taught people to recognize when their memory retrieval was being artificially disrupted while developing techniques for maintaining cognitive function and intellectual confidence despite exposure to interference-inducing environments, including media consumption, technology use, and informational overload. The protocol involved what Elizabeth called cognitive autonomy practice, the ability to recognize and counteract memory interference while developing skills for protecting cognitive function and maintaining intellectual confidence that support rather than undermined personal knowledge access and reasoning capabilities. The research extended beyond theoretical analysis to understanding how tip-of-the-tongue exploitation affected modern approaches to learning, information processing, and intellectual development across various contexts where memory interference could either protect against cognitive overload or enable systematic manipulation depending on environmental design and individual awareness. The psychological impact of learning about cognitive protection was profound. People felt more intellectually confident and cognitively autonomous when they understood how to recognize and counteract artificial memory interference while maintaining access to their knowledge and reasoning capabilities despite environmental attempts to disrupt cognitive function. Elizabeth's research revealed that many learning difficulties, intellectual frustrations, and cognitive confidence problems in modern contexts occurred because people had been systematically exposed to memory interference that created artificial cognitive limitations while preventing them from developing healthy memory function and intellectual autonomy. The training involved teaching people to recognize the cognitive and emotional signs of memory interference while developing practical techniques for maintaining memory function and intellectual confidence despite exposure to environments designed to fragment attention and disrupt cognitive processing. Elizabeth's protocols addressed the common concern that protecting against memory interference would reduce openness to new information or technological assistance. Her research showed that understanding cognitive protection actually enhanced learning by enabling people to distinguish between helpful information access and manipulative memory disruption, while maintaining appropriate use of external resources without sacrificing cognitive autonomy. The timing of cognitive protection education proved crucial in Elizabeth's research. People were most receptive to learning about memory interference when they were experiencing increased tip-of-the-tongue frustrations or beginning to recognize patterns of cognitive dependency that affected their intellectual confidence and learning effectiveness. Elizabeth's protocols addressed the complexity of maintaining cognitive autonomy while appropriately utilizing external information sources and technological assistance. The research showed that effective cognitive protection required balancing intellectual independence with helpful resource utilization while avoiding both rigid self-reliance and systematic dependency that undermined cognitive function. The research revealed that effective cognitive protection required helping people understand the neurological basis of memory retrieval while developing practical skills for maintaining cognitive function and intellectual confidence that enhanced rather than undermined learning capability and intellectual development. Elizabeth's work demonstrated that cognitive autonomy awareness was particularly important for aging adults who were experiencing natural changes in memory function because their increased susceptibility to tip-of-the-tongue states made them more vulnerable to systematic memory interference and cognitive manipulation through artificial creation of intellectual dependency. The educational applications of Elizabeth's research were revolutionary. Students who learned cognitive protection techniques were better able to maintain intellectual confidence and learning effectiveness while protecting against educational technologies and methods that artificially created learning difficulties to increase dependency on institutional guidance and technological assistance. The technology applications were equally significant. Technology users who understood memory interference could maintain cognitive autonomy while utilizing digital tools and information sources without allowing technological assistance to systematically undermine their natural memory function and intellectual confidence. The therapeutic applications of Elizabeth's research created opportunities for helping individuals who had been damaged by systematic memory interference understand that their cognitive difficulties often resulted from environmental manipulation rather than natural intellectual decline, while developing techniques for recovering cognitive confidence and memory function. The workplace applications demonstrated how understanding memory interference could inform more supportive approaches to information management and cognitive assistance that enhanced rather than undermined employee intellectual confidence, cognitive autonomy, while protecting against systematic creation of dependency and intellectual insecurity. The research revealed that tip-of-the-tongue exploitation had widespread consequences across multiple domains because it affected fundamental cognitive processes while making people vulnerable to systematic manipulation through artificially induced intellectual frustration and reduced confidence in personal knowledge and reasoning capabilities. Elizabeth's research revealed that the presque-vous pattern was particularly dangerous in contexts involving aging populations where natural changes in memory function could be systematically exploited to create excessive cognitive dependency while undermining intellectual confidence and autonomy that remained important for psychological well-being and personal agency. The research extended to understanding how memory interference affected modern approaches to information literacy and intellectual development by demonstrating how systematic disruption of memory retrieval could reduce critical thinking and independent reasoning while increasing reliance on external sources that might not serve individual interests or intellectual growth. Elizabeth's protocols addressed the complexity of maintaining memory function while managing natural age-related changes in cognitive processing. The goal was not preventing all memory changes, but developing sophisticated skills for distinguishing between natural cognitive evolution and artificial memory interference, while maintaining intellectual confidence and cognitive autonomy throughout the lifespan. The research revealed that effective cognitive protection required helping people distinguish between natural memory variations that were part of healthy cognitive development and artificial memory interference imposed through environmental manipulation, while developing skills for maintaining intellectual confidence and cognitive function when facing legitimate cognitive challenges. Elizabeth's work demonstrated that cognitive autonomy, awareness, was a learnable skill that improved with practice and conscious attention. People could develop ability to recognize memory interference, protect cognitive function despite challenging environments, and maintain intellectual confidence while appropriately utilizing external resources that enhanced rather than replaced their natural cognitive capabilities. The technological applications of cognitive protection research began emerging as brain training software and cognitive enhancement applications incorporated memory protection principles while helping users maintain cognitive autonomy and intellectual confidence despite exposure to information-rich environments that could overwhelm natural memory processing. The research extended to understanding how accurate information about cognitive function affected modern approaches to aging and intellectual development by demonstrating that protecting memory function and intellectual confidence could enhance both cognitive capability and psychological well-being throughout the lifespan. Elizabeth's research revealed that cognitive protection awareness was particularly important for young people who were developing relationships with technology and information sources that could either enhance or undermine their natural cognitive development based on their understanding of memory autonomy versus systematic intellectual dependency. The measurement applications of cognitive protection research allowed individuals and healthcare providers to assess memory function while identifying patterns that enhanced or undermined cognitive autonomy and intellectual confidence through protective rather than manipulative approaches to cognitive assistance and information access. The research revealed that accurate understanding of memory function was particularly crucial during periods of technological transition when new information systems might be designed to enhance genuine cognitive capability or systematically undermine intellectual autonomy while creating artificial dependency on external guidance and technological assistance. Elizabeth's work demonstrated that cognitive protection truth was not just a neurological issue, but had practical implications for intellectual freedom, educational effectiveness, and personal agency, as systematic memory interference consistently undermined cognitive autonomy while serving institutional control rather than individual intellectual development and learning capability. The legacy of Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell's research continues to transform how people understand memory function, cognitive autonomy, and the relationship between natural memory processes and environmental manipulation. Every time someone recognizes artificial memory interference, maintains intellectual confidence despite tip-of-the-tongue frustrations, or protects their cognitive autonomy while appropriately utilizing external information sources, they're practicing the cognitive protection that Elizabeth died defending. Perhaps Elizabeth understood something so fundamental about human cognitive autonomy and intellectual independence that it threatened systems built on maintaining cognitive dependency rather than supporting natural memory function and intellectual confidence. That Presque-Vous revealed how natural memory processes could be weaponized against intellectual autonomy while preventing the kind of cognitus that could enable independent thinking and resistance to systematic manipulation. In a world that exploits memory vulnerabilities to create cognitive dependency while maintaining illusions of helpful technological assistance, the revolutionary act is learning to protect natural memory function and maintain intellectual confidence in a society that systematically interferes with memory retrieval while punishing cognitive autonomy and intellectual independence. The radical choice is developing skills for maintaining cognitive function despite environmental attempts to disrupt memory processing and create artificial intellectual dependency. In a culture that mistakes technological dependency for cognitive enhancement while hiding the systematic exploitation of natural memory vulnerabilities, the transformative decision is learning to recognize when your brain's loading screen is natural processing versus artificial interference designed to undermine your cognitive autonomy. The ultimate truth that Elizabeth Hartwell discovered and died protecting is that tip-of-the-tongue states reveal fundamental mechanisms of memory processing that can be either supportive or exploitative, depending on environmental design and institutional intention. That understanding memory interference enables both protection against systematic cognitive manipulation and conscious support of natural memory function, and that recognizing the difference between natural memory processing and artificially induced cognitive disruption empowers people to maintain intellectual autonomy while utilizing external resources that enhance rather than replace their cognitive capabilities. The person who learns to protect against memory interference becomes infinitely more capable of intellectual independence and cognitive confidence, while resisting systematic attempts to undermine their natural memory function and reasoning capabilities.
As second wind represents one of the most fascinating and counterintuitive aspects of human physiology during exercise. Picture this scenario. You're 20 minutes into what started as an ambitious workout session, your lungs are burning, your legs feel like concrete pillars, and every fiber of your being is screaming at you to stop. You're convinced that your body has reached its absolute limit, that continuing would be nothing short of torture. Then, almost magically, something shifts. The crushing fatigue begins to lift like morning fog, your breathing becomes easier, and suddenly you feel like you could run for miles. This dramatic reversal from exhaustion to renewed energy is what athletes and exercise enthusiasts call getting their second wind, and it's essentially your body playing the ultimate Uno reverse card on what seemed like certain defeat. The experience of second wind feels almost supernatural in its intensity and timing. One moment you're contemplating whether calling an ambulance would be an overreaction, and the next you're wondering if someone secretly slipped performance-enhancing substances into your water bottle. The transformation is so dramatic that many people describe it as feeling like their body was deliberately trolling them, holding back its true capabilities just to see how committed they really were to their workout goals. This isn't just psychological trickery or wishful thinking, it's a legitimate physiological phenomenon with complex biological mechanisms working behind the scenes. To understand what's really happening during second wind, we need to dive deep into the intricate world of cellular energy production and metabolic switching. During the initial phases of exercise, particularly when you first start moving from a state of rest, your body relies heavily on readily available glucose stored in your muscles and liver as glycogen. This glucose-based energy system is incredibly efficient for immediate needs, but it's also limited in capacity and can be quickly depleted during intense physical activity. As these easily accessible sugar stores begin to run low, your body starts sending distress signals. This is when you experience that overwhelming sensation of fatigue, muscle heaviness, and the desperate urge to stop moving. However, your body is far more resourceful than this initial wave of exhaustion would suggest. Behind the scenes, a completely different energy production system is quietly ramping up, preparing to take over when the primary glucose system starts to falter. This backup system relies on fat oxidation, a process that's slower to activate but provides a much more sustainable and long-lasting source of energy. The transition from glucose metabolism to fat metabolism doesn't happen instantly. It requires time for the necessary enzymes to activate, for blood flow patterns to adjust, and for the entire metabolic machinery to shift gears from one fuel source to another. The metabolic switch from sugar to fat burning involves a complex cascade of biochemical reactions that would make even the most sophisticated factory assembly line look simple by comparison. When your body recognizes that glucose stores are depleting, it begins releasing stored fatty acids from fat cells throughout your body. These fatty acids then travel through your bloodstream to your working muscles, where they undergo a process called beta oxidation. This process breaks down the fatty acid molecules into smaller components that can be fed into the same cellular energy production pathways that were previously using glucose, but with dramatically different efficiency characteristics. Fat oxidation produces significantly more energy per molecule than glucose metabolism, which explains why second wind often comes with a sensation of abundant sustainable energy rather than the quick-burning intensity of sugar-fueled exercise. However, this increased energy yield comes with a trade-off in terms of speed and oxygen requirements. Fat burning requires more oxygen than glucose burning, which is why the transition period can feel particularly challenging as your cardiovascular system works to deliver the additional oxygen needed for this more complex metabolic process. The timing of second wind isn't random or unpredictable, though it can vary significantly between individuals based on their fitness level, metabolic efficiency, and training history. Generally, the phenomenon occurs somewhere between 15 to 30 minutes into sustained aerobic exercise, though this window can shift based on numerous factors including the intensity of the activity, environmental conditions, nutritional status, and individual metabolic characteristics. Well-trained endurance athletes often experience their second wind earlier and more predictably than sedentary individuals, largely because their bodies have adapted to make the metabolic transition more efficiently through regular training. The psychological component of second wind cannot be understated, even though the underlying mechanisms are purely physiological. The dramatic shift from feeling terrible to feeling great creates a powerful mental boost that often amplifies the physical benefits of the metabolic change. Many athletes describe this moment as a breakthrough point where exercise transforms from being a struggle against their body to working in harmony with it. This psychological shift can lead to improved performance that goes beyond what the metabolic changes alone would explain, creating a positive feedback loop between mind and body. Environmental factors play a significant role in both the timing and intensity of second wind experiences. Temperature, humidity, altitude, and air quality can all influence how quickly and effectively your body makes the transition from glucose to fat metabolism. Hot and humid conditions tend to delay second wind because your cardiovascular system is working overtime to manage temperature regulation in addition to delivering oxygen and nutrients to working muscles. Conversely, cooler temperatures often facilitate an earlier and more pronounced second wind experience because your body can dedicate more resources to the metabolic transition rather than temperature management. Nutritional status before exercise dramatically impacts the second wind phenomenon. If you start exercising with low glycogen stores, either from recent intense training or dietary restriction, your body may transition to fat burning much earlier, potentially shortening the uncomfortable transition period, but also reducing the dramatic contrast that makes second wind feel so pronounced. On the other hand, starting exercise with fully loaded glycogen stores can delay the metabolic switch, making the initial fatigue phase longer but potentially creating a more dramatic second wind experience when it finally occurs. The role of hormones in second wind is complex and multifaceted. As exercise intensity increases and glucose stores begin to deplete, your body releases various hormones including epinephrine, cortisol, and growth hormone, all of which facilitate the mobilization of fatty acids from storage sites. Additionally, hormones like glucagon work to maintain blood sugar levels by promoting the conversion of stored glycogen to glucose, while insulin sensitivity changes to optimize fuel utilization. This hormonal orchestra works together to orchestrate the metabolic transition that underlies the second wind phenomenon. Training adaptations can significantly modify the second wind experience over time. Regular aerobic exercise improves your body's ability to utilize fat as fuel, increases the number and efficiency of mitochondria in muscle cells, and enhances the cardiovascular system's ability to deliver oxygen to working muscles. These adaptations can make the transition from glucose to fat metabolism smoother and more efficient, reducing the severity of the initial fatigue phase while potentially making the second wind sensation more subtle but more sustainable. Different types of exercise produce varying second wind experiences. Long steady-state aerobic activities, like distance running, cycling, or swimming, are most likely to produce classic second wind sensations because they create the sustained energy demands that necessitate the metabolic switch from glucose to fat burning. High-intensity interval training might produce multiple mini-second winds as your body alternates between different energy systems, while strength training typically doesn't produce the same phenomenon because the energy demands are different and the rest periods allow for recovery of immediate energy stores. The cardiovascular adaptations that occur during the transition to second wind are remarkable in their scope and precision. Heart rate often stabilizes or even decreases slightly once second wind kicks in, despite maintained or even increased exercise intensity. This occurs because the cardiovascular system becomes more efficient at delivering oxygen as blood flow patterns optimize for the new metabolic demands. Blood vessels dilate in working muscles while potentially constricting in non-essential organs, creating a more efficient distribution of the cardiovascular resources available. Individual variability in second wind experiences is enormous, influenced by genetics, training history, body composition, metabolic efficiency, and even psychological factors. Some people are naturally more efficient fat burners and may experience second wind earlier and more consistently, while others might struggle with the metabolic transition and find the phenomenon less pronounced or reliable.
Age also plays a role, with younger individuals often experiencing more dramatic second winds, though this isn't a hard rule and well-trained older athletes can still experience powerful second wind sensations. The breath control aspects of second wind are particularly interesting from a physiological standpoint. Many people notice that their breathing becomes deeper and more rhythmic once second wind kicks in, often accompanied by a subjective sense that breathing requires less conscious effort. This occurs partly because the metabolic efficiency of fat burning, once fully activated, can actually reduce the immediate oxygen debt that builds up during the initial glucose burning phase of exercise. The breathing pattern changes also reflect improved coordination between the respiratory and cardiovascular systems as they adapt to the sustained exercise demands. Recovery patterns after experiencing second wind tend to be different from recovery after exercise that doesn't reach this metabolic transition point. Because fat burning produces less metabolic waste products than glucose burning, the immediate post-exercise recovery period might feel different, often with less severe muscle fatigue and potentially faster normalization of heart rate and breathing. However, the total energy expenditure during a second wind workout is often higher, which can lead to increased overall fatigue and longer recovery times, particularly for individuals who aren't accustomed to sustained fat-burning exercise. The phenomenon of second wind has important implications for exercise prescription and training program design. Understanding that the initial phase of exercise often feels disproportionately difficult can help both fitness professionals and exercise participants set appropriate expectations and develop strategies for pushing through the challenging transition period. Many successful endurance training programs explicitly acknowledge this metabolic transition and structure workouts to take advantage of the increased efficiency and enjoyment that often accompanies second wind. Mental strategies for reaching and maximizing second wind often involve accepting and working through the initial discomfort rather than fighting against it or giving up too early. Experienced endurance athletes often describe learning to trust that the difficult phase will pass, using breathing techniques, pace management, and positive self-talk to bridge the gap between initial fatigue and the energy renewal of second wind. This mental aspect of the phenomenon highlights the interconnected nature of physical and psychological factors in exercise performance. The relationship between second wind and exercise enjoyment is profound and often transformative for people's long-term relationship with physical activity. Many individuals who discover second wind report that it fundamentally changed their perception of their body's capabilities and their relationship with challenging physical tasks. The experience of pushing through apparent limits and discovering hidden reserves of energy can be psychologically empowering and motivating, leading to increased confidence in other areas of life beyond exercise. Understanding second wind also provides valuable insights into human evolutionary biology and our species' adaptations for endurance activities. The ability to efficiently switch between different fuel sources during sustained physical activity likely provided significant survival advantages for our ancestors, who needed to maintain energy for extended periods during hunting, gathering, or migration activities. The dramatic nature of the second wind experience might have served as a psychological motivator, encouraging continued effort even when initial energy stores were depleted. Modern applications of second wind understanding extend beyond traditional exercise into areas like workplace productivity, stress management, and therapeutic interventions. The principle of pushing through initial resistance to reach a more sustainable and efficient operating state has parallels in many areas of human performance and well-being. Some therapeutic approaches incorporate exercise protocols specifically designed to help individuals experience second wind as a metaphor for perseverance and hidden capabilities. The second wind,
being watched when completely alone, represents one of humanity's most persistent and unsettling psychological phenomena. This feeling, which can range from a subtle unease to overwhelming terror, manifests as an acute awareness of invisible presence, a crawling sensation between the shoulder blades, or the inexplicable certainty that hostile eyes are tracking every movement. The experience transcends cultural boundaries and appears across all demographics, suggesting something fundamental about human psychology rather than learned behavior or cultural conditioning. This hypervigilant state emerges from deep evolutionary programming that once served as a crucial survival mechanism. Our ancestors lived in environments where genuine threats lurked in shadows, where predators possessed superior night vision and stealth capabilities, and where the difference between paranoid caution and relaxed confidence often determined survival. The human brain developed sophisticated threat detection systems that erred on the side of false positives rather than potentially fatal false negatives. It became evolutionarily advantageous to assume danger existed even when evidence remained absent, because the cost of unnecessary vigilance paled compared to the consequences of missed threats. The neurological architecture supporting this hypervigilance involves multiple brain regions working in concert to maintain constant environmental surveillance. The amygdala, often called the brain's alarm system, processes potential threats at lightning speed, triggering physiological responses before conscious awareness even registers danger. The anterior cingulate cortex monitors for conflicting information and unexpected changes in the environment, while the insula processes internal bodily sensations that might signal threat. These systems operate continuously, creating a background hum of vigilance that most people rarely notice during daylight hours or in familiar populated environments. However, certain conditions amplify this natural surveillance system to uncomfortable levels. Darkness represents the primary catalyst for heightened paranoia because it eliminates our most relied upon sense while simultaneously triggering ancient fears encoded in our genetic memory. Human vision, optimized for daylight activity, becomes dramatically less effective in low-light conditions, forcing the brain to rely more heavily on other senses and, crucially, on predictive modeling based on incomplete information. The imagination fills gaps in sensory data with potential threats, creating vivid scenarios of danger that feel remarkably real despite lacking any objective foundation. Quiet environments compound this effect by removing the auditory masking that normally helps regulate our threat detection systems. In silence, every small sound becomes magnified and potentially significant. The subtle settling of a house, the whisper of wind through trees, or the distant hum of electrical appliances can trigger elaborate threat scenarios. The brain, designed to detect patterns and assign meaning to sensory input, begins connecting unrelated sounds into coherent narratives of stalking, intrusion, or surveillance. This process happens largely below conscious awareness, presenting the conscious mind with fully formed feelings of being watched or followed. The modern environment, paradoxically, both reduces genuine physical threats while simultaneously creating conditions that trigger our ancient alarm systems. Contemporary life involves spending significant time alone in enclosed spaces, often in silence and darkness, conditions that would have represented extreme vulnerability to our ancestors. Urban environments produce constant low-level stimulation through ambient sounds, electronic emissions, and subtle vibrations that can maintain the nervous system in a state of mild activation without providing clear sources for that activation. This creates a perfect storm for hypervigilance to flourish. The psychological component of feeling watched involves complex interactions between expectation, intention, and interpretation. When someone begins to feel surveilled, their attention naturally becomes more focused on detecting signs of that surveillance. This heightened attention makes them more likely to notice ambiguous stimuli that can be interpreted as evidence supporting their suspicion. A shadow that might normally go unnoticed becomes a potential hiding place. A sound that would typically blend into background noise becomes a possible footstep. The very act of looking for evidence of being watched increases the likelihood of finding seemingly confirmatory experiences. Social isolation can intensify these experiences significantly. Humans evolved as intensely social creatures who found safety in groups, and prolonged solitude triggers various psychological adaptations designed to motivate social reconnection. One manifestation involves increased sensitivity to social signals, including the possibility of unseen observers. The brain may generate feelings of being watched as a way of maintaining social vigilance, even in the absence of actual social contact, keeping social detection systems active and ready for when genuine social interaction resumes. The phenomenon also connects to broader patterns of anxiety and stress response. Chronic stress or anxiety can maintain the nervous system in a state of heightened reactivity, making it more likely to interpret ambiguous stimuli as threatening. This creates a feedback loop where feeling watched increases stress levels, which in turn makes the person more susceptible to feeling watched. The physical symptoms of anxiety, such as increased heart rate, shallow breathing, and muscle tension, can themselves become interpreted as evidence of genuine threat, reinforcing the sense that danger lurks nearby. Technological factors in modern life add new dimensions to these ancient fears. The ubiquity of surveillance cameras, smart devices with microphones and cameras, and data collection systems means that people are in fact being watched and monitored to unprecedented degrees. This objective reality can blend with subjective paranoid feelings, making it difficult to distinguish between reasonable privacy concerns and irrational hypervigilance. The knowledge that digital surveillance is constant and largely invisible may contribute to feelings of being watched even in supposedly private spaces. The architectural design of modern spaces can inadvertently trigger hypervigilance responses. Large windows that reveal interior spaces to outside observers, long hallways with multiple potential hiding spots, or rooms with many entry points can all contribute to feelings of vulnerability. Open floor plans, while aesthetically pleasing and functionally efficient, can leave people feeling exposed and unable to create defensible personal space. These design elements interact with evolutionary programming that favors enclosed, easily defended spaces with clear sightlines and limited access points. Sleep disruption often correlates strongly with increased paranoid feelings, creating another reinforcing cycle. Poor sleep affects emotional regulation, threat assessment, and reality testing, making people more susceptible to interpreting ambiguous stimuli as threatening. Simultaneously, feelings of being watched or surveilled can significantly interfere with sleep quality as the hypervigilant nervous system remains too activated to allow proper rest. This sleep disruption then increases vulnerability to further paranoid experiences, creating a self-perpetuating pattern. The role of media consumption cannot be overlooked in understanding modern hypervigilance. Constant exposure to news about crime, terrorism, and various threats, combined with entertainment media that frequently features stalking, home invasion, and surveillance themes, can prime the psychological threat detection systems to expect danger. This media diet creates a cognitive environment where feeling watched seems not only possible but probable, providing numerous detailed scenarios for how such surveillance might occur. Individual differences in sensitivity to these experiences vary considerably based on factors including genetics, early life experiences, current stress levels, and personality traits. People with higher levels of trait neuroticism or anxiety sensitivity tend to experience more intense and frequent episodes of feeling watched. Those with trauma histories, particularly involving stalking, harassment, or violations of personal safety, may have sensitized threat detection systems that trigger more easily and intensely than average. The cultural context also shapes how these experiences are interpreted and discussed. Some cultures have rich vocabularies and accepted explanations for feelings of invisible presence, while others dismiss such experiences as purely psychological or pathological. These cultural frameworks influence whether people feel comfortable discussing their experiences and how they make sense of them when they occur. Understanding the evolutionary basis of hypervigilance can provide some relief for those who experience intense feelings of being watched. Recognizing these sensations as normal functioning of ancient protective systems, rather than signs of mental illness or accurate threat detection, can reduce the secondary anxiety that often accompanies paranoid feelings. This metacognitive approach involves observing the paranoid thoughts and feelings without necessarily believing or acting on them. The phenomenon of feeling watched when alone represents a fascinating intersection of evolutionary biology, neuroscience, and modern psychology. It demonstrates how systems that once provided crucial survival advantages can become sources of distress in contemporary environments that trigger ancient alarm systems without providing appropriate outlets for the generated activation. By understanding these mechanisms, people can develop more effective strategies for managing hypervigilance while still benefiting from the legitimate protective functions these systems serve. The persistence of this experience across human populations suggests it will likely continue to be a common aspect of human psychology. Rather than viewing it as purely problematic, we might better understand it as evidence of the remarkable sophistication of human threat detection systems and their crucial role in our species' survival. The challenge lies in learning to modulate these systems appropriately for modern environments while preserving their essential protective functions for situations where genuine threats exist. There's horrifying images of bodily deformations, dismemberments, or other manifestations of body horror. Their organism instantly activates one of the most powerful defensive mechanisms that can be called the "oh hell no" reflex. This reaction is so primal and instinctive that it bypasses rational thinking and activates at the level of the deepest brain structures responsible for survival. The physiological foundations of this reaction are rooted in evolutionary mechanisms that have been forming over millions of years. When our ancestors saw mutilated bodies or signs of disease, it signaled serious danger to their own survival. Decomposition, blood, open wounds, Unusual body deformation. All of this could mean the presence of predators, diseases, or other threats that should be immediately avoided. Therefore, the brain developed an extremely sensitive system for recognizing such danger signals. When a person looks at body horror imagery, the first thing that activates is the amygdala, an ancient brain structure responsible for processing fear and threat. This process happens so quickly that consciousness doesn't even have time to fully process what it sees. The amygdala sends signals to the hypothalamus, which instantly triggers a cascade of stress responses throughout the body. The immediate physical manifestation of this reflex begins with a sharp intake of breath, often accompanied by an involuntary stepping back or turning away from the stimulus. The sympathetic nervous system floods the bloodstream with adrenaline and cortisol, causing the heart rate to spike dramatically. Blood pressure rises as the cardiovascular system prepares for potential flight or fight responses. The pupils dilate to take in more visual information about potential threats in the environment. Simultaneously, the digestive system experiences a profound disruption. The stomach contracts violently, often producing waves of nausea that can range from mild queasiness to overwhelming urges to vomit. This response serves multiple evolutionary purposes. It empties the stomach to prepare the body for rapid movement, and it creates an association between the disgusting stimulus and the need to avoid it in the future. The salivary glands may either shut down completely or produce excess saliva as part of the pre-vomiting response. The muscular system responds with characteristic tension patterns. The facial muscles contract into expressions of disgust, the nose wrinkles, the upper lip curls, and the eyebrows furrow deeply. These facial expressions are remarkably consistent across cultures and appear to be hardwired into human neurology. The shoulders often rise and pull inward as if trying to make the body smaller and less vulnerable to whatever threat the horrifying imagery represents. Cognitively, the "oh hell no" reflex triggers immediate avoidance behaviors that operate below the threshold of conscious decision-making. The brain's visual processing centers actively work to suppress detailed analysis of the disturbing imagery, often creating a kind of mental blur or tunnel vision that prevents the person from focusing on the most disturbing elements. This protective mechanism helps preserve psychological well-being by limiting the depth of traumatic visual processing. The intensity and specific manifestations of this reflex vary significantly between individuals based on numerous factors. Genetic predisposition plays a crucial role. Some people inherit heightened sensitivity to disgust stimuli, while others have naturally higher thresholds for disturbing imagery. Personal history and trauma exposure also dramatically influence the response. Individuals who have experienced medical procedures, accidents, or violence may have either heightened sensitivity due to traumatic associations, or conversely, they may have developed some degree of desensitization through repeated exposure. Cultural background significantly shapes the expression and interpretation of this reflex. In some cultures, open displays of disgust and revulsion are socially acceptable and even expected when encountering disturbing imagery. In others, maintaining composure and emotional control is valued, leading people to suppress or internalize their "oh hell no" responses. However, the underlying physiological reaction remains remarkably consistent across cultural boundaries, suggesting its deep evolutionary origins. The neurochemical cascade that accompanies this reflex involves complex interactions between multiple neurotransmitter systems. Dopamine levels drop sharply, reducing feelings of pleasure and reward. Serotonin regulation becomes disrupted, potentially affecting mood stability for hours or even days after exposure to particularly disturbing imagery. GABA production may increase as the brain attempts to calm the overactivated fear response, but this natural tranquilizing effect often takes time to counteract the initial stress reaction. Interestingly, the "oh hell no" reflex serves important social and psychological functions beyond immediate threat avoidance. It helps maintain social cohesion by creating shared experiences of revulsion that reinforce group boundaries and norms. When people collectively react with disgust to the same stimuli, it strengthens social bonds and reinforces shared values about what is acceptable and unacceptable within their community. The reflex also plays a crucial role in moral and ethical decision-making. Research has shown that physical disgust responses can influence moral judgments, making people more likely to condemn behaviors or situations that trigger their revulsion reflex. This connection between bodily disgust and moral disgust suggests that the "oh hell no" response extends far beyond simple threat detection and into the realm of complex social and ethical reasoning. Modern exposure to body horror through media, movies, video games, and internet content has created new contexts for this ancient reflex. Many people now encounter more graphic and disturbing imagery in a single day than their ancestors might have seen in a lifetime. This constant exposure can lead to either sensitization, where people become increasingly reactive to disturbing content, or desensitization, where the threshold for triggering the reflex gradually increases. The phenomenon of morbid curiosity represents a fascinating paradox within the oh hell no reflex system. While the immediate reaction is avoidance and revulsion, many people experience a secondary impulse to look again, to understand what they've seen, or to share the experience with others. This creates an internal conflict between the primal avoidance response and higher-order cognitive processes that seek to make sense of disturbing experiences. Professional exposure to body horror, such as in medical, forensic, or emergency response fields, requires individuals to develop sophisticated coping mechanisms to override their natural oh hell no responses. This professional desensitization is achieved through gradual exposure, cognitive reframing techniques, and the development of emotional compartmentalization skills. However, even highly trained professionals often retain underlying physiological responses, even when they can consciously suppress their behavioral reactions. The recovery period following activation of the oh hell no reflex can extend far beyond the initial exposure. Many people report lingering images, intrusive thoughts, or physical sensations that persist for hours or days after encountering disturbing body horror content. Sleep patterns may be disrupted as the brain continues to process the threatening imagery through dreams and nightmares. Appetite often remains suppressed as the digestive system slowly returns to normal functioning. Understanding the oh hell no reflex has important implications for mental health, media consumption, and social policy. Recognizing that this response is both normal and adaptive can help people process their reactions to disturbing content without shame or self-judgment. At the same time, awareness of individual variations in sensitivity can promote greater empathy and understanding for those who react more or less intensely to body horror stimuli. The reflex also highlights the importance of content warnings and graduated exposure in therapeutic and educational contexts. Rather than forcing people to confront disturbing imagery without preparation, effective approaches work with the natural protective mechanisms of the oh hell no reflex, while gradually building tolerance and coping skills. In conclusion, the oh hell no reflex represents one of humanity's most fundamental survival mechanisms, evolved over countless generations to protect us from genuine threats and dangers. While modern contexts may present us with disturbing imagery that poses no real physical threat, our brains and bodies continue to respond as if our lives depend on immediate avoidance and revulsion. Understanding and respecting this powerful reflex, while learning to work with it rather than against it, represents an important aspect of psychological health and emotional well-being in our increasingly media-saturated world.